Nothing.
That looks good, Chip.
Okay. So my good side?
Is your hair even on both sides?
Does it look okay? I can polish it a little bit.
All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have a full complement. Good evening, Sharon.
Am I unmuted?
You are now.
Okay.
And that's 6:30.
It is Caroline up and streaming yet? You may have to wait for that.
Seems to be. I see the little tag up on the left. We're live on custom live streaming. Peter, that mean we're good?
We are live and we are recording. Everything is going. I'm just checking right now on the cable. Looks like John says, nope. I'll find out once I.
A little dark for the back porch, Dan.
No fire tonight?
No fire tonight. A little chilly, a little windy.
Oh, yeah.
For those who may be in the waiting room, wondering why we're sitting here, we're just waiting to make sure that we're broadcasting on our local cable channel.
We are on cable 3. There's a problem with the Facebook feed on Caroline's computer, so she's logging off. That's secondary importance, so she's going to try to get that working while we go ahead with the meeting.
Okay.
Because that's not one of our primary communication methods, but she'll be back. She'll give it a shot, and if she can't do it, she'll be back. But we can go ahead.
All right. So we will call the meeting to order. Freeport Town Council meeting number 21-20 occurring tonight on the Zoom platform. It is Tuesday, October 6th, 2020, and the time is just after 6:30 p.m. We will take attendance and then do the Pledge of Allegiance. For the record, could you please announce yourself as here or present? Councilor Riley.
Present.
Councilor Whitney.
Here.
Councilor Tracy.
Here.
Councilor Pilch.
Here.
Councilor Horn.
Here.
And Councilor Lawrence.
Present.
And the chair, John Egan, is here. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Tony, for having the flag handy. Before we get into the mechanics of the meeting, I just want to share a little bit about the procedure of how our public meetings on Zoom are conducted and the various ways that members of the public who are either watching on their computer or listening on a phone can participate in the meeting. There will be several occasions this evening for public participation. One of them is an agenda item called public comment period, which is a chance for anyone to approach the council with a question or a comment, or to describe something that may be of concern to them on an item that is not on our agenda. So this is an open agenda item for the members of the public to address the council on non-agenda items. And then we'll have an informal discussion at the end of the meeting after the action items, towards the end of the meeting, for a little bit more informal back and forth about a number of topics. And we'd be happy to take questions or comments from any members of the public who are participating at that time. To participate in a Zoom meeting, if you're on your computer, you would use a feature called the raise hand. And if you hover your cursor either in the middle of the lower section of the screen, or sometimes it appears on the upper left or upper right hand corner, you'll see a hand and it says raise hand. If you raise your hand, then the manager, Peter Joseph, who is coordinating the meeting, will recognize you, and in order of folks raising their hand, will be brought into the live portion of the meeting so that you can talk and address the council in real time. There will not be any video on members addressing the council, just audio, but it will be in real time. We generally ask for participants from the public to keep their comments to 3 or 4 minutes to be courteous to anybody else who may be waiting. I don't think we have any substantially hot issues this evening. So if there's a need for a little bit more conversation, we'll probably have time for that. So we'll go over these steps again. So people who are new to participating in our public meetings on Zoom, we'll go over the steps and procedures of how you can engage and talk with the council in live time. Thanks for joining us this evening. Our second order of business this evening is to waive the reading of the minutes as prepared by Sharon Coffin of meeting number 20-20 held on September 15th, 2020, and to accept the minutes as presented. Any
Move to
questions on
approve
the
as
minutes?
written.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further conversation on the minutes? Okay, we'll take a vote. All votes on Zoom meetings need to be enunciated counselor by counselor. There are no block votes where everybody raises their hand. That's to allow us to have an accurate record of full council votes. So we'll take a roll call vote on this on our first item, which is the adoption of the minutes as presented. Councilor Riley,
Yes.
Councilor Whitney,
Yes.
Councilor Tracy,
Yes.
Councilor Pilch,
Yes.
Councilor Horn,
Yes.
Councilor Lawrence,
Yes.
and the chair, John, votes yes. Minutes are accepted. Thank you very much, Sharon.
You're welcome.
Our third order of business is announcements. I have a few to start. This is a chance for councilors to share any news of any events or activities that are going on in the community. I'm wearing my, I have to move my phone down, my camera here. I'm wearing my I voted button today because at 4:30 this afternoon, I voted in our election. It was a fantastic experience to be able to go in and vote at town hall with entirely 3 people in the whole room. It was really, really interesting. So on that issue, absentee ballots for the November 3rd, 2020 election can be requested now by contacting the clerk's office at 865-4743, and that's at extension 122 or 123. Or you can go to the state's website, maine.gov, and there'll be plenty of directions on how to request an absentee ballot. You can also vote now in person, as I did this afternoon at Town Hall, with way less crowds than there'll be likely on Election Day. More information on absentee voting can be found at the town's website, freeportmaine.com. The seasonal flu clinic is coming up this Wednesday, the October 21st, not this coming Wednesday, not tomorrow, but October 21st, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Freeport Town Hall. Visits this year due to the pandemic are by appointment only, not by walk-in. Again, you can call 865-4743 extension 120 to set up an appointment for a flu shot. There'll be a limited number of appointments, so if you're unable to schedule an appointment, you can find the full Chan's Midcoast Parkview Flu Shot Clinic schedule at midcoasthealth.com/flu. Chan's is a home healthcare agency operating in the Mid-Coast, and they'll be holding a drive-through flu shot clinic every Saturday and Sunday from 8 to 4:30 p.m. at the Mid-Coast Hospital Parkview campus, starting this weekend and ending on November 9th. So like a lot of things in our upside down world, things have moved to drive-through, and you can now get a flu shot in a drive-through clinic every Saturday and Sunday at the Mid-Coast Hospital Parkview campus starting this weekend. Nominations are now being accepted for the 2020 Citizen of the Year. Each year, the Freeport Town Council presents a Citizen of the Year award to honor those who have significantly contributed to the quality of the town. Nomination forms are available at the town office or on the town's website, freeportmaine.com. The deadline for submitting your nomination for Citizen of the Year is December 10th, 2020. And the last item I want to share is the Freeport Conservation Trust 2020 Freeport Trail Challenge is on. COVID-19 has changed the way many of us do things, but fortunately getting outside is still considered a safe activity. Hike the 4 specified Freeport trails and you can win a prize. You can print your own passport at freeportconservationtrust.org. That's their website. And you can have your passports mailed to you by calling the Freeport Conservation Trust at 865-3985, extension 212. So there's 2 ways to get your passport for the Trail Challenge, on their website or by calling 865-3985, extension 212. And you can also enter by sending Freeport Conservation Trust pictures of yourself on each trail at the email address of info@freeportconservationtrust.org. As a reminder, for the safety of everyone, please keep your distance from other folks on parking areas and on the trails. Please leash your dog and wear masks if there are other people around. And I also wanted to just announce, although I was unable to due to a schedule conflict, we are still engaged with the MDOT, the Maine Department of Transportation, on getting updates and information about the replacement schedule for the 2 bridges that affect directly, 3 bridges actually, that directly affect Freeport traffic, which is the exit 20, the exit 22, and the Cousins River Bridge on the border with Yarmouth. And I don't believe there's any immediate action coming that the town needs to vote on, but our engineer, Adam Bliss, has been attending those meetings, and there's an invite out for anyone who would like to join. Interesting stuff going on. Unfortunately, I was unable to join today. Other councilors have announcements they'd like to make. Councilor Whitney.
Yes, I'm happy to announce that we have a live concert happening this Saturday. The Meeting House Arts Community Concert will be held this Saturday at 2 p.m. By the Arts and Cultural of Freeport. It is located right at 40 Main Street. This is exciting. They have it set up so that you can buy a pod, a circle, and you'll have 6 feet distance from any other family. They have various artists that will be playing, and students' tickets are $10 and adults are $15. If you go onto their website, you can order the tickets, and you can also see the map that they have laid out that will show you walking, just, the pattern that they've designed to keep everybody safe. Masks will be required, and they will only seat 80 people maximum to keep everybody safe. So it's nice to announce that we have a live concert happening this weekend.
Councilor Horn.
Yeah, this is can go either on information exchange or announcements, but this is the time of year when the council takes a moment to recognize the volunteer contribution that all of our boards and committee members have made, particularly those that have stepped down or are stepping down. And so I have, normally we would have a little ceremony, as you know, and we would give out certificates and to those that have served under 10 years and a plaque for those that have served for more than that. So in lieu of an actual little reception, I just would like to briefly go through the names and of the people that are stepping down and the committees that they've served on, and just for us all just to take a minute to recognize them and realize that our town works as well as it does because of all the hard work from the folks that live here and the committee work that they do. So just quickly, the 2020 volunteer recognition, these are outgoing board and committee members. Their certificate recipients are Robin Barron, who is on the Winslow Park Commission, Guy Blanchard on the Conservation Commission, Geraldine Campanelli, the Complete Streets, and also on Active Living, Art Colvin from the Board of Appeals and the Sewer District and the Paper Streets back in 1999, for those of you who remember, George Connick on the Winslow Park Commission, Carissa Davan from the Winslow Park Commission, Judith Donahue from the Library of Trustees, Chester Guggen on Complete Streets and the Appeals, Chris Grimm on the Shellfish Commission, as well as the Conservation Commission, Rodney Harmon from the Cable TV Regulatory Board, Adalgisa Haltrop, and pardon me if I mispronounce that, from the Library Board of Trustees, Katrina Milliman on Complete Streets and Sustainability Advisory, Teresa Olaksu on the Conservation Commission, Dan Pilch, our own Dan from Coastal Waters Commission, Jennifer Rancourt on Active Living, Suki Rice on Sustainability Advisory, Kate Rosenfeld also on Sustainability, Dale Sawyer, or otherwise known as CHOP affectionately, on the Shellfish Commission for 9 years, Carla Seaman on the Library Board of Trustees, Michael Stumbo on the Conservation Commission, Dimitra Volgari on the Conservation Commission, Drew Wing on Project Review Board, and Lonnie Winrich on the Planning Board. And the last name I'll read is for the plaque recipient. And this is a person that served from 1999 to 2020 on the Board of Assessment Review. This person was chair from 2002 to 2020. That's a heck of a contribution, and that one goes to Mike Healy. So hats off to Mike. I think he might have broken a record with that one. So just really want to give a shout out to all the folks on the list and for all the contributions that have been made throughout the years. The combined amount of years of service here is pretty staggering. So Freeport's lucky.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. That's a really inspiring list of residents who have stepped up and contributed their time. I'm certain, just from the length of that list, that their time commitment easily exceeds 10,000 hours of personal time committed towards the town running smoothly. And there is a maxim out there that after 10,000 hours, you have the right to say that you can master something, but it usually takes 10,000 hours of practice. And I think the smooth running of our town and the engagement of all of our committees is a reflection of those 10,000 hours. So thank you very much to all of those members that were just read. Stunning list. Other announcements from other councilors. Peter, you had your hand up earlier, but your manager report is next on the agenda. So
I'm going to address it then. I just, something that it's about bridges. So we'll talk about it in a moment.
okay.
Something I just learned about 15 minutes before I came on this call. So
great. Councilor Riley.
So I didn't realize we were now shifted into the information exchange, but I have two.
We haven't quite yet, Doug. We're just still doing announcements, but
okay.
If you've got
you were going to promote Peter next, so someplace we got to fit in there.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm just jumping ahead. Sorry.
Ready for information exchange?
We don't have any other announcements. Then we can start information exchange. Just want to make sure. I don't see any hands up. Go ahead, Doug.
So the Ordinance Committee has been very active, and it's in the work of creating an ordinance for short-term rentals. There was a small working group which consisted of Councillor Tracy, Town Manager Joseph, and Town Planner Pelletier. I don't believe anybody else, maybe Nick might have been involved as Code Enforcement Officer. And they created a document that we've been able to then supplement and give guidance and direction that will be filtered down through our town planner, Caroline Pelletier. But I would really like to thank the work of Councillor Tracy and Councillor Pilch on this. We have accomplished a lot, and hopefully we'll have something that will be presented here, possibly even by the last meeting of this month. Second item, the Complete Streets Committee met today, and they were happy to receive the input that was requested from our town planner and our town engineer and other parties that were contributing. Chief Nurse contributed to this as well. The document that we will discuss later, again, is a policy and is not part of an ordinance. And it's our responsibility to accept or not accept this document, and we can approve or not. We don't have to vote on not approving it, but it is the basis for the operation of the Complete Streets Committee going forward. And it does have an annual review of this policy so that the information that was supplied by those people can be implemented as we go through with this. Second part of this is we also then had an election of new officers. Doug Leland has chosen not to continue on as chair, but was happy to accept the position of vice chair. And Greg Nishu, who retired from a paying job, has just inherited a job that's going to not pay him, but give him a lot of hours. So we want to thank Greg for that. We also want to thank Doug for really shepherding this process of the transition from traffic and parking to complete streets and creating a committee that is going to be very beneficial to the town as we move forward. Thank you.
Other information exchange, discussions about committees or specific events coming up from other counselors? Councilor Whitney.
Yes, I would like to just update everybody that I'm continuing to work with a great group of people and very closely with Mary Davis, the president of FEDC, to focus our time and on the re-energizing of downtown Freeport. We're continuing to interview many different consultants and then report back to a group. And our hope is to give a presentation to everyone here on October 20th with all the details that we've collected over this period of time. It's been a really fun work, by the way, so thank you. And also just a reminder that we have a COVID relief fund that is for anybody in Freeport who have been directly impacted by COVID-19. If you are experiencing some sort of financial difficulty, please reach out to Johanna Hasselman because there have been funds that have been collected to help support you during this time.
Any other counselors have information exchange item? Councilor Pilch.
Two quick things. One is a reminder that we also have a COVID loan program for businesses. This is a loan program, not a grant program, for small businesses in Freeport for up to 2 tranches of $5,000 each that have favorable terms. So that's available. There are also programs not run by the town, but that are accessible to businesses from the state. There's a Department of Economic and Community Development grant program, also Greater Portland Council of Governments grant program. So lots of resources available. FEDC would be a good contact to put you in touch with those programs. Separately, just reporting back ongoing work from, I don't want to call it a committee, but a group of about a dozen or so people that have been reviewing the policies and procedures from the Freeport Police Department. And Lieutenant Goodman has been doing a great job of kind of being the representative of the police department. He's here on the meeting tonight. And each 2 or 3 weeks when we meet, we kind of go through a chunk of policies. And next up, we've got sort of employee policies we're looking at. So we've been doing a lot of work. There are a lot of policies, dozens and dozens and dozens of them. So we're due to kind of continue that work. I'm happy to kind of talk more about that. If anyone has questions, feel free to get in touch.
Thank you. Related to that effort going on with the police department, the last couple of meetings we've had informal conversations about the council forming a racial equity review committee an inventory of the town's HR and operating policies and procedures to review for any potential of implicit racial bias that may be in the town's operating documents. And I wanted to report that at the next meeting, we will have an agenda item to convene a formal committee. It's an ad hoc committee, so it's not indefinite. But it will be a committee of the council, which was the indication at our last meeting of the direction for the structure of this committee, to begin review of town HR and operating policy documents and assure that we are not inadvertently reflecting implicit racial bias. I just want to remind everyone here this evening, as well as members of the public, that this is an effort that is not a gotcha. There's no blaming going on here. There's no incident that we're responding to. This is a proactive effort that the town is going to take some steps to assure the whole community that our governing documents and our policies and our procedures do not inadvertently or overtly contain any racial bias language or inferences, and that there is no room for racial discrimination in the town of Freeport. And so we're going to have a committee convened. The appointments committee will officially take action to populate that committee after we have a vote. At our next meeting, there'll be an agenda item to convene that and have it move forward. So I just wanted to mention that it's happening. And my apologies for some of the members of the public who have been emailing me about when that's going to happen, and I've not been able to get back to them. With my involvement, I just changed jobs, so that's taken up a huge amount of my time over the past couple of weeks. But anyway, so that will be happening at our second meeting in October. Any other information exchange items before we move on to the manager's report? Councilor Riley.
I would be remiss not to have included in this process with the ordinance committee the contributions by a citizen of our town, Joyce Villieu. It's been a great help on the short-term rentals. So I want to thank Joyce for this as well.
Great. I particularly want to thank Joyce for her patience in the process of moving this forward. It's been quite some time, and Joyce has been very helpful, and hope she continues to be, and recognizes the wheels of the town government are moving, but they may appear to be standing still at times. But thank you for your patience, Joyce, and all your efforts that went into that draft language. All right, I don't see any other hands. Peter, well, we'll move on to the next order of business, which is the town manager's report. And
Thank you, Mr.
apparently we're
Chair.
gonna hear something about bridges.
Yeah, I'll save that to the end so I can just make my hasty exit out the door here after we have the conversation. Just a brief update on absentee voting. We talked about it, that it's available. We're encouraging everybody that's not comfortable voting in person, that there are several opportunities and ways to get your vote in early, whether that's through the mail or here in person at Town Hall, which started yesterday. I just want to give an update on numbers from the clerk's office. So far, we have received 3,264 requests for absentee ballots. That includes both the 2,700 mail requests that went out last week at the end of the week that have been, submitted over months, as well as several hundred this week and several hundred in-person votes just starting yesterday. Of those 3,264 requests, 900 plus have been returned back already. So those are both the people that voted in person. The majority of those are people that voted in person and dropped their ballots off. So it's counted as a absentee request and then a return.
New record already.
Several hundred have come back through the mail already, which is great. And they just went out last week. So 909 returned back already. And that's of about high 6, low 7,000 registered voters typically is what we have on the rolls after an election is over. So we're already easily above 10% voter turnout just from absentee ballots. So keep up the good work down at the clerk's office. Chris and Lynn are doing a fantastic job, in addition to all the employees at Town Hall that are picking up the slack with the high volume of traffic through the doors this week. There's been a lot of people that have stepped up and volunteered to help the two of them and our election employees that are also working in the council chambers to process ballots. So anybody that wants to come out and vote, come out and do it. Monday through Thursday, 7:30 to 6 p.m., 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. here at the Town Hall. the clerk will take care of you. Real quick update on some Main Street work that's going to start the week of 10/19. This is not going to impact traffic, but it is going to impact pretty much everything else. The parking stalls on the north side of Main Street from Howard Place, which is roughly the corner of the LL Bean retail store, that's Justin's Way. From Justin's to it's going to go all the way to the corner of the Key Bank, which is Elm Street. Then it's going to go across Main Street to in front of the Tuscan Bistro on Main Street. That's going to be a ditch that's going to need to be dug. It's utility work. It's for phone lines. You may have noticed a couple weeks ago there was a water main break in front of the Harrisicot Inn. This is tied to that problem. It also, during fixing that, it created a problem with the telephone utilities on Main Street. So it's got to do with buried underground trenches. So there will be utility work that's being done by the phone company and an excavation company to rewire some of those main trunk lines that are underneath the ground. That's expected to run for 1 to 2 weeks. That'll mostly be the parking that'll be disturbed, but then we'll have to cross diagonal across Main Street between Key Bank and the Tuscan. So just putting that out there so people know what it is and that they're expecting the disruption. They have gone door to door, notified all the businesses in the area. And if they have any questions, they can contact our Public Works Department directly. This is not a town project, it's a utility project, but we will be having a little bit of oversight over it since it's a road that it's happening in. Just want to make the council public disclosure and the public aware that we signed a administrative consent agreement at location number 1 and number 2 Overboard Lane for shoreland zoning, cutting violations that had happened there. Just as an update, as a reminder to everyone, an administrative consent order is when there's a violation of a zoning ordinance that there's a plan to fix it. The town manager is allowed to enter into a consent agreement, but has to notify the council that it's happening. I'm only allowed to do that in a case where the consent agreement will restore 100% of the violations that have happened to back to a non-violating status. So I just disclosed these, but if there's anything where a zoning violation is allowed to continue, that would be a consent order that would have to be agreed to and signed by the town council. So just notification that one is out there, that we just processed that one. I think it went fairly well. And last but not least, the bridge conversation. We just got off a 2-hour bridge call, and by we, I mean several members of the bridge committee that's composed of residents, also myself, Adam, and a few committee members, and a lot of people from Yarmouth as well. Our counterparts from Yarmouth are on the bridge committee as well, because it's the Exit 17, the Exit 20, and the Exit 22 bridge committee. The bulk of our focus, though, is on the Exit 20 and 22 bridges, obviously, from Freeport's perspective. We have a crunch here. DOT is asking for immediate input from the town, which the only thing I can think of is our next council meeting. So I'm putting it out there and making everyone aware of it. I have not had time to consult with council leadership because this meeting just got over after 6 o'clock, right before we started this one. So John and Tawny, feel free to kick me off the stage and tell me that we would talk about this, how we're going to schedule this. But DOT is looking for input and needs input from the town on cost sharing. And this specifically relates to pedestrian facilities to be built with the bridges. And when I say needs input, they are asking for it in a 2-week period here, which some people might think unreasonable, but it has to do with the grant staging and when they need to have the final design of the bridges completed, which is a year from today, or a year from a month ago, actually. And to make everyone aware of what we're talking about in scope here, we are talking about mid hundreds of thousands of dollars. So for example, Exit 20, the scope of what we're talking about at Exit 20 for a shared bike multi-use path is in the range of about $500,000. The scope of what we're talking about for a sidewalk for the Exit 22 bridge is in the range of, I want to say 200, nope, I'm on the wrong bridge.
Hold on, I've got it right here for you.
Yeah, I think it's more expensive.
$200,000 for a sidewalk and about $850,000 for a shared multi-use path at exit 22. This is obviously, these numbers are, I won't get into details because I've just received the presentation. Obviously, we'll all see it before we have to have this discussion, but they are asking for very quick feedback. And the only thing that I can think of is to have the various committee members meet with the council at the October 20th meeting. After the election and the meetings in December that the new council would have scheduled would be too late for this project. So essentially that would mean that these things would not get added onto the project as it was designed.
Do we have a placeholder in our capital budget for any of this work, Peter? I thought we had a placeholder that we were holding.
Yeah, not in the current fiscal year though. So we were planning on these costs in out years. Like that's likely when we'd have to write the check, but we're still going to have to give a binding commitment to DOT because they're going to incur, hundreds of thousands of dollars of design work based on what we tell them. So they're not going to do that without some kind of a commitment from us. Obviously, this timing is not optimal, but I'm just throwing it out there so everyone's aware of it. I don't have a solution tonight, but I think we're going to need to come up with a solution where we talk with our committees at your next council meeting on the 20th to get them some feedback prior to the election.
Sarah?
Are they asking for us to pay all of it? These bridges are, one of them at least is between two communities. Are they going to play part of it? What is your understanding of the request?
Yep. So what we were told, the standard operating policies for the department today match up with my understanding of other communities, what they've gone through. So they will connect, if there are facilities on either side of a bridge, they will connect those facilities at the department's cost. In this case, the exit 20 bridge, where there is a sidewalk on one side and a planned sidewalk on the other side, they feel they have not committed 100% to this, but they feel that the sidewalk construction, in addition to the bridge, the extra 6 feet of construction would be on the department's dime. Anything above and beyond that would be the town's responsibility. Exit, meaning a multi-use path, if you were to go from a sidewalk to a 10 or a 12-foot wide path, that would be 100% on the town. And as I said, that's a roughly $800,000 cost minus the $245,000 sidewalk cost. So it rounds out to be about $500,000. Think of that as an upgrade if you want to upgrade it. The exit 22 bridge, there are facilities on neither side of that bridge. So anything sidewalk construction or multi-use path would be, sidewalk would be 50-50 shared with the town and the state, and multi-use path, everything above that would be 100% on the town.
On both towns or on Freeport?
This is just Freeport. These are just Freeport projects. The Cousins River Bridge, we've already accounted for that money.
Okay.
That cost separately in the budget. So this is the first time we've seen dollar estimates, or else obviously, and the first time we've even discussed them about cost sharing was about an hour ago. So this obviously would have been in front of you a lot quicker. Right. Have these conversations prior.
Councilor Riley?
Can we make sure that we get input from Complete Streets and Active Living?
Yeah, I think my suggestion would be to have them at the meeting. DOT also offered to be present, have a project manager present at the meeting if that would help, if there are questions, but I'll leave that up to the council prior to the meeting for us to request it.
That would be the meeting on the 20th, Peter?
The 20th, yep.
Yeah, okay. Councilor Tracy?
Is there any explanation for why they've given us so little time? I mean, these projects are, we've been talking about them for a while, and it seems amazing to me that we have so little time to think about such a big expenditure.
I don't disagree. There's no rationale as to why. I think the rationale as to why they need an answer now is that to fit into the timing schedule, they've got to design these bridges. For the 80% of this is funded by the feds through grant money. So they've got 11 months essentially to come up with a comprehensive approved design for the federal government. So they can't wait 6 months for us to make that decision or the project won't happen. as to why they're having the conversation with us today as opposed to several months ago, you'd have to ask them that question. We didn't get into that. We didn't have time for that at the meeting. We literally had to shut the meeting off because we reached our deadline for time and we were trying to comprehend the bigger questions here.
Councilor Horn?
Yeah, Peter, is there an opportunity to access any PACT money, or are there, I mean, has Adam sort of been running down any leads on other possible grant opportunities that would help offset some of this if we were to go forward?
I don't think that they're eligible for PACS funding because it's already bridge program money and it's federal builds grant money as well. So there's already 2 grant programs funding it, and we are not in line for any PACS funding for it. And that, as you know, that's pretty highly competitive. If there was if we had, available PACS bike ped money or something like that, I'm sure we could ask to repurpose it, but I don't think we're in line for any of that. I'll ask Adam that question. He's on the call. He could hop in if he knows the answer to it, but he probably doesn't. Adam, do you know the answer? I see your mic just went on. Do you know the answer to Councilor Horn's question?
Well, my MO is to always leverage grant money against capital expenditures. That I have a track record of that. And my intent is to go after all grants available to us, which is inclusive of PACS, MDOT, Bike Ped Grant Program, among other mechanisms. For the bridge, so you can think of this as 2 parts. The bridge project, of which the upgrade would be local share. Then there are the connections into those bridges in the form of sidewalks or multi-use path, which is where we would go request grant funding from the sources I mentioned.
And I think it's important to note the entire bridge is not on the town to pay for. They're just talking about the upgrades to the bridge that we have requested through the process, above and beyond what's existing right now, essentially, is the way to think about it. The bridge as it exists now is 100% funded through state and federal money. Both of those bridges are, as long as nothing changes with the state budget. And the sidewalk upgrade to the exit 20 bridge would be 100% funded. At least that was the preliminary decision of the people involved in the project, that they would make the request because there's a connection there. It's essentially the exit. If you want to upgrade that sidewalk into a bike path, that would be an add that the town would be 100% on the hook for. And if you wanted to put either a sidewalk or a bike path on the exit 22 bridge, that would be 50% match for the town for the sidewalk, and a bike lane would be 100% of everything above the sidewalk cost would be on the town.
I'll just add, I've attended a number of these meetings that, the dollar amounts now are that's new information, and puts it in sharp contrast about what the DOT is going to pay and what they're expecting for local match. But the idea that the opportunity for the towns or local municipalities to participate in bridge design, and that MDOT was not only open to, but really warmly receiving ideas from communities about how to improve bike and ped access over these largely automotive bridges. It's not a surprise that there's going to be a local match requirement as part of these design upgrades. So that's not anything dramatically new. When you're looking at 6-digit numbers, that can make it seem real, like, wow, where did this come from? But I believe that there's not been any sort of hide the ball here. I think the DOT staff, while being not articulate about the cost, that the upgrades that they were encouraging, maybe not encouraging, but inviting us to participate in the design process and kind of popcorn up some ideas, such as the ones that we've seen. I think we've known all along that the town is going to have to participate in a substantial portion of those. And the idea that the DOT paying for an improvement on a bridge in which there are no connections of similar use on either side is also not new. That's an issue that was brought up more than a year ago on a committee that I attended. So I appreciate the the very urgency of trying to get some commitments back to that committee about the town's willingness to commit to local funds. But I'm gonna have to get some more information about, what kind of a binding dollar amount this council, which is coming to its end here in one more meeting, is going to be able to do for this project going forward. I think there's substantial support from the community writ large, informally, for us to improve both of those bridges for bike and ped access to connect the two sides of our community that's divided by the interstate. But it's another story altogether when you're actually signing a document that says the town will spend X dollars. So that just makes it more real. So yeah, we got to cover a lot of ground in the next 2 weeks on that, on whatever that item is, that's for sure.
Yep. And like I said, sorry to drop this, but I needed to get this out at ASAP if it's going to be on a council agenda in 2 weeks, if we're going to even try to remotely give them feedback. So I told them I would be breaching this tonight. They did ask, I think after I picked my jaw up, I think it was visible that maybe I was shaking my head or in disbelief or something. And they said, well, is this unusual? Or are you surprised by this? Does this match up with what your understanding is? I think I said exactly what John just articulated, which is, no, the share, we knew there was a share. The percentages are consistent with what we've seen in other communities and what you've told us. The only thing that's got me going with my jaw on the ground is that we've got to come up with at least some guidance to them in 2 weeks. And they're like, okay, we understand that. They got it. I think that this is going to be a stretch, that this is going to be a real, burden on us to try to give them any feedback valuable within a 2 week period.
Yeah, and that's heavily complicated by the timing of the term cycle of our council membership. That next meeting is the last meeting for this existing council. We'll have an election. There'll be some new members on the council after that election, but we won't convene as that group, I believe, until significantly late into November to actually start any business, which may be too late.
If that was going to be a problem, I would suggest you guys have emergency meetings, but they're really looking for information before, even the election at this point. Yeah. I don't think it would do much good for us to have a special meeting in November or December or anything to worry about this. That's beyond their window, essentially.
Yeah.
At this point.
Councilor Tracy?
I just find it really, I guess, surprising that they would not give us more time to discuss that kind of a magnitude of an expenditure with our townspeople. I mean, that level of an expenditure is the kind of discussion that requires, I believe, a public hearing. And as has already been discussed, input from committees. It's a very different thing to be conceptually on board versus having a binding commitment for that amount of money. I know you know that, but I am, in all my years on the council, we have never had to make that kind of a decision, that magnitude of a decision in this time frame. And I think it really does a disservice to the council and our relationship with our constituents to put us in that kind of a position at that level of money. And it shows to me a lack of recognition of A, the amount of money, and B, the process that's required. So I know that we have an ongoing relationship with MDOT. I appreciate the coordination and cooperation that's been going thus far, but I hope that you will convey the dismay that at least one councilor feels about having to make that kind of a decision in this kind of a time frame. I think it puts us in a really tough spot.
We already had a government 101 lecture administered by me at the meeting about how the legislative process really needs to happen in January and through June for you guys to make that budget decision. The appropriate legislative process is for the council to decide in January through June on that dollar amount, that you do have the ability to make an appropriation anytime throughout the year, but that's way outside of the norm. I've already communicated that's, that would be way outside of the norm of the council's operations at this point.
Well, fair enough, but I understand that may not be possible. That is actually not my beef. My beef is that the time frame in which, I mean, yes, sometimes we have to make appropriations outside of the budget process. It's unfortunate, but it happens. But like I said, requiring it in the cycle of one meeting, like not even really, because we'll barely be able to notice it. People will not know what's going on. And we will not be able to get the kind of input that I think should be received prior to making that kind of a decision, even though we've known that there's probably a local match, but that magnitude of a local match is pretty big.
I 100% agree with you. I will pass that on, and we can pass it on in person at, you know, in the very near future. I think you'll be talking with them. So
are we going to set this for a public hearing?
There's nothing, I mean, there's not even anything to set for a public hearing at this point. There's not a decision that's been made. There is such a magnitude of items to be discussed on this. So you're talking about what is the preferred option? You know, we need to get feedback from our committees in addition to even before we even start thinking about the budgetary impact of this. I mean, we can notice the heck out of it that we're going to be talking about it, but I don't know what, you know, I wouldn't even be able to dream up a draft motion for this until we have more discussion on it.
Well, the converse of that too, Peter, and I'm not sure, and you know, we can talk about this between now and the next meeting, but even if there were to be some sort of a general consensus about what we may agree to in terms of portions of these improvements, I think this council needs to also know what's the process and penalty if later councils decide, no way, we're not spending 750 grand on bike ped upgrades on 2 bridges that are being built by the DOT. And so I think that part of it needs to be in the realm of the discussion too, because Sarah's absolutely right that we're being asked to make a substantial, I mean, 750 or even, whatever, if you do both of them, it's well over $1 million. That's a huge impact on any budget element in the town's process. Even if we were to stretch it out over a number of years in capital budget in terms of planning for it, it's still a significant impact. And there's no way to say that does not have an impact on taxes.
Yeah, we've been over this with them before. I don't know if it doesn't sink in or different projects, but I won't and can't sign any commitment form without a council appropriation. Without the actual vote that authorizes me to write a check for it, I'm not signing something that will agree to do $750,000 in the future unless you guys actually take an appropriations vote on that, which is what I had the conversation. Sarah, I didn't say exactly. I get what your point is. That wasn't the exact conversation I had with them. It was more about the government process that needs to be observed here with, for you guys to actually have something that's legally enforceable that I can then write a check, or I can have somebody write a check for 2 years from now that, like what John just said, can't be overturned by a future council or a future town manager or somebody else saying, we're not in on it. That's really the problem. And that's a much bigger governmental action than just saying, yeah, we conceptually agree to this, paying this amount 5 years in the future. You need something binding before we can sign anything with them. And that it's a stretch to get it done within their time frame. But if we don't, we're not going to be, these bridges aren't going to get built the way that people would like to see them built. So go ahead, Sarah.
Is the concern is the concern about timing that they are designing, they don't want to design, they need to start designing and they don't want to spend the money designing unless we're going to actually buy the upgrade product?
Yes, the design needs to be done. I think they said September of 21 to qualify for that federal grant, which is 80% funding for the project. So if they don't have the design done September of 21, the project doesn't happen, or at least it gets funded local state share as opposed to 80% federal, 20% state, 0% local.
So I just wonder whether there's some discussion that we could have with them that's something along the lines of, look, we need more time to process this decision. However, if we end up, so please proceed with, if we can get some feedback, please proceed hypothetically with a bike ped path. on bridge, exit 20. But if we decide not to move forward and not to pay for the bike ped path, we will share in the design, the proportionate design cost, which is basically like we're paying for an option, essentially. I can't imagine that design fee is going to be crazy. Maybe I'm wrong, but DOT time, I don't know who's designing it, but I just wonder whether there's a creative solution to their problem, which is they don't want to design something that's not going to be bought, but we can't buy it yet because we don't know what we're buying. What if we just agree to cover the design cost?
They're
Yeah, and-
contracting it out, first of
and-
all, so there is a cost from a firm. HNTB is the bridge design firm that's working on it.
Sure.
It would be a percentage of the total cost, whatever that is, 20% or, something
We'll
like
have to find out what that is.
Yep. Adam could give us a rough estimate, but they could give us a pretty firm estimate probably, in 2 weeks' time.
Well, it's also that they're not going to be that far down the road with the design work, even though they may have let out a bid for the design work. They're not going to be that far down the road with the design work in 4 or 6 weeks, which would allow us to have some kind of a process here on how we might come to a conclusion about the dollars.
We will talk about, before the meeting next week, we will have some detailed conversations with them about what the timeframes for design work and, what their drop dead dates are and all that kind of stuff. So we'll have that good information for you. I'll make sure that's available on the 20th.
Councilor Riley?
Doug?
All right, this is going to be a couple part question. If you answer one part of it correctly, you'll get the next part. This $800,000 quote unquote figure that's being thrown out there, that's not for design. That's actually for the cost of the added to the bridge. Is that correct?
Correct. There would be no additional design cost. DOT is covering all of the design costs with
So
state.
you're also, now the second part of the question is, you're also saying that this is going to be funded federally, 80%, state, whatever percentage. So what is our actual percentage? Are we have to pay the 800,000 or are we less 80% of that because the feds are going to pick that up?
Yep. So I'll lay out all of the costs, 3 parts. The design costs are going to be 100% borne by the state, no matter what. So the town will not pay any design costs. The feds will not pay any design costs. The construction of the replacement for what's there now, the cost of, the millions of dollars to rebuild the bridge in the same width as it is the scope with the same type of foundations, adjusted with all the road work to connect it, all that stuff, is going to be 80% federal, 20% state. The cost for anything above and beyond, additions to the bridge, I got to be careful on this one. For a multi-use path, it's going to be 100% everything over sidewalk cost on the town. The sidewalk costs are different at both exit 20 and exit 22. Exit 20, they agreed that sidewalk cost would be 80-20 federal, state, no local share. At exit 22, since there are no existing connections to the bridge, their initial position is that sidewalk would be 50-50 state and local, 0 federal. Does that make sense?
Are the feds involved in these discussions at all?
They've already awarded the grant. That's the most that they have to make sure that the conditions of the grant are complied with. And that's the only way they're involved for the funding side and to make sure that the state meets the conditions of the grant.
But it could be that the feds are still willing to take up 80% of the overall cost of the bridge.
Yeah, do you mean for the additions to the bridge?
For the overall cost of the bridge.
Yes, the state will pay, the feds will pay 80% of all the construction cost and the state will pay 20% of all the construction costs. The state will not, the DOT's policy is that they will not put add-ons into the federal grant program. They don't do that for any of the projects, is what we were told.
Well, maybe we need to get an opinion from the feds because it may not be costing us the $1 million. Maybe our DOT people can see what the answer would be to that.
We could ask that question for sure.
Could give us more time.
Okay. Well, so lots to get on the board for our next meeting.
I dropped enough of a nuclear bomb in the middle of this meeting yet? Sorry.
I'm glad you bridged the subject.
I think you guys would have been a lot more unhappy if I told you about it after this meeting. And hey, we got one meeting to figure this out. I'm with Sarah. I was a little bit surprised by the timing, to say the least. And then when I told them the schedule, the council schedule, they were equally horrified. I think that there was really not a lot of opportunity for town of Freeport input. So
Yeah, zero. Does that conclude your report, Peter?
yeah, do you want to talk about anything else that I can ruin the night? Maybe. Oh, no. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
That concludes my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter.
Don't go far. Our next item on the agenda is the public comment period. For anyone watching on the Zoom platform or listening in on your phone, this is a chance to address the council on non-agenda items. We have a relatively light agenda this evening, so if there is something that members of the public, your individual always wanted to ask, or there's an issue that's of a concern to you, or if you have a nomination for Citizens of the Year, anything that you'd like to bring forward, this is the chance, the public comment period on our agenda. The process to do that is to use the raise hand feature on the Zoom screen. The manager will then recognize you and move you over to the live audio you can address the council in real time. And I'm gonna chat for a minute or so here to give people a chance to have the courage to raise their hand. Sometimes it can be a little daunting to be the first one to speak at one of these sections in our agenda.
You only have 2 on Zoom.
We've got one audience member who knows how to use the Zoom feature very well.
Okay, great.
So I'm sure if she would like to speak, she knows the raise hand feature and she would jump right in.
All right, we'll break the ice then with the first member who's raised their hand.
Oh, no, I mean, the hand hasn't been raised yet. I'm saying there's only one person in the audience who's a regular.
Oh, I see. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you said someone had raised their hand.
No, sorry.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, then I guess we don't need to linger too long. Peter, we're sure there's no one there with a raised hand?
I'm 100% positive.
Okay, great. Then we will go ahead and close the public comment period and move on to our 7th order of business, which is to take action on the following items of business as read by the council chair. To consider action relative to adopting the October 6th, 2020 consent agenda. Be it ordered that the October 6th, 2020 consent agenda be adopted.
Second.
There is exactly one item on the consent agenda this evening to consider action relative to accepting the resignation of Ben Thompson from the Complete Streets Committee. Is there any reason to take that out of the consent agenda for a discussion? Seeing none, the motion to accept the consent agenda has been seconded. We'll go ahead and take a vote unless there's any further conversation on the consent agenda. I don't see any hands coming up. We'll take the vote. Councilor Riley?
Yes.
Councilor Tracy?
Yes.
Councilor Pilch?
Yes.
Councilor Horn?
Yes.
Councilor Lawrence?
Yes.
And Councilor Whitney?
Yes.
You all moved around on my screen, so I'm out of order. And the chair votes yes. Consent agenda is adopted. Our next item is, that was item number 148-20, Sharon. I'm sorry, I didn't articulate the item number. Our next item is 149-20. Councilor Lawrence, could you please read the item?
Yes, I can. To consider action relative to approving proposed amendments to Chapter 46, General Assistance Ordinance and Appendices A through D and H for the period October 1, 2020 to September 30, 2021. Public hearing.
Second.
To motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
All right, we have to take a vote to open the public hearing. Councilor Riley?
Yes.
Councilor Tracy?
Yes.
Councilor Pilch?
Yes.
Councilor Horn?
Yes.
Councilor Lawrence?
Yes.
Councilor Whitney?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay, this is a public hearing on the proposed amendments, chapter 46. Peter, do we have any members of the public who wish to participate in the public hearing?
Got no raised hands, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Do we have any potential raised hands?
Same audience. We've got a member.
Same audience. Okay.
Got a member of the media and a frequent Zoom participator who will call my desk phone if I'm ignoring her, I'm sure. So
if this is a public hearing, we'll just stretch this out a little bit longer to make sure that there's nobody who wants to participate. You would use the raise hand feature and the manager will then recognize you. If we're not seeing any raised hands, then we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Council Lawrence, could you please read the motion to close the public hearing?
Yep, motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Councilor Riley,
Yes.
Councilor Tracy,
Yes.
Councilor Pilch,
Yes.
Councilor Horn,
Yes.
Councilor Lawrence,
Yep.
Councilor Whitney,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Okay, the public hearing is closed. Any further conversation? I know we've talked about this item before. Peter, is there any updates or any feedback you've gotten? I mean, this is a sort of a compliance issue on our general assistance ordinance.
this is, we've received we very rarely, I've never received any feedback outside of a council inquiry into this before. This is, as many people are aware, the general assistance program, there's a split between town expenditure and state expenditure. The state reimburses us for certain expenditures that we make in the program, a certain percentage of them that varies. That's changed by the legislature on a regular basis, but we get reimbursed a significant chunk of the program as long as we comply with the standards that are set forward by the state. And to do that, we change our ordinances every time the state sets new appendices, which are essentially the allowable rates that can be reimbursed. They vary these by housing market in year. So, for example, Cumberland County might go up or down on some of these, but the Bangor area might stay flat based on what kind of the cost of living for these items are. So we just adopt these to comply so that we can get reimbursement. If we don't, you're free not to adopt these, but the state will disqualify our program when we get audited and we won't be reimbursed for those costs that we expect. So
Thank you.
it's a no-brainer unless you don't like the state program and you want to make your own program.
Councilor Lawrence, could you please read the be it ordered?
I certainly can. Be it ordered that the proposed amendments to Chapter 46, General Assistance Ordinance and Appendices A through D and H for the period October 1, 2020 to September 30, 2021 be approved.
Second.
Any further conversation before we take the vote? All right, we're going to go in the other direction. Councilor Whitney,
Yes.
Councilor Lawrence,
Yes.
Councilor Horn,
Yes.
Councilor Pilch,
Yes.
Councilor Tracy,
Yes.
Councilor Riley,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Thank you very much. Motion carries. Our next item is item number 150-20. Consider action relative to a proposed amendment to section 413 Village Commercial 1 District of the Freeport Zoning Ordinance. Councilor Riley, could you please read the be it ordered and further ordered?
Be it ordered that a public hearing be scheduled for October 20th, 2020 at 6:30 via Zoom meeting to discuss the proposed amendment to section 413-Village Commercial 1, VC1, of the Freeport Zoning Ordinance. Be it further ordered that copies be distributed equally between the town clerk's office, the town manager's office, and the Freeport Community Library for inspection by citizens during normal business hours, and the notice be placed in the Freeport local cable channel and the town website.
Caroline, do we have any further conversation on this? I know we had some
Did we get a second?
discussion about this. Oh yeah, sorry. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, great.
Yeah, this is a pretty simplistic change. It was applicant-driven agenda item. We had a resident in the village who wanted to put an addition onto their modest house, only to find out that single-family homes in the village commercial district or downtown area are not a permitted use. So in order to add on, they would be limited to 15% if they were able to prove undue hardship and get a variance granted by the Board of Appeals, which is very difficult. So the wording before you is just to make existing single-family homes as of whatever date this gets adopted, if it goes forward, to be considered permitted uses. So essentially our 10 or 12 single-family homes in the village can stay where they are, and will have the ability to add on should they want to do that.
But this language does not allow undeveloped land or change of use on parcels to create single-family homes?
Correct. That did come up. I think there's been a lot of, chatter about residential development in the village, and the planning board thought, A, it wasn't part of this application, but B, it's something that really needs a more comprehensive look, and there's going to be some visioning coming up. So it didn't seem like the right time to put it all into one application.
Great. It's nice to know that at least the planning board's considering that as the town goes through its change in view with a lot of different dynamics. Any other comments, Councilor Riley?
It's also nice to know that the other houses in this district will then have an equal opportunity to do the expansion versus going through the Board of Appeals.
Indeed.
Thank you, Caroline.
All right, the motion's been moved and seconded. I don't see any further conversation. We'll go ahead and take the vote. Councilor Riley?
Yes.
Councilor Tracy?
Yes.
Councilor Pilch?
Yes.
Councilor Horn?
Yes.
Councilor Lawrence?
Yes.
Councilor Whitney?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Caroline. Our next item is number 151-20 to consider action relative to awarding the bid for a new fire chief vehicle. Councilor Tracy, could you please read the be it ordered?
Sure. Be it ordered that the award for the new fire chief vehicle be awarded to Casco Bay Ford for purchase of an SUV Interceptor (parentheses EcoBoost or hybrid) for the amount of $44,671, which relates to the EcoBoost, or $47,821, which relates to the hybrid. Note, the fire department analysis shows that the life cycle costs for gasoline versus hybrid engine are very similar. Therefore, the fire department is seeking guidance from the town council on vehicle type. The fiscal year capital program, the fiscal year 21 capital program appropriated $445,000 for this purchase. The balance in the fire department equipment reserve is $1,241,500.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Chief Jordan, very glad to see that you're seeking council guidance on which vehicle to buy. Let me be the first one to step up and say, you should buy the hybrid. I'm extremely pleased to see that there's an opportunity for a adequate vehicle to meet your needs that can be purchased in a hybrid mode, which will dramatically change the fuel consumption on that particular element of the fleet. And not only that, but it sets an example that the town is moving towards recognition of sustainability. I can't wait for there to be a fire chief vehicle that runs on electricity only, battery electric. That's coming soon.
If you want to buy me a Tesla, I'd be pleased.
I like that.
I'll pile on. I'll go with
make one work.
I vote the hybrid for sure.
Well,
Councilor Lawrence.
is a hybrid fuel and electric, or is it just electric?
It's fuel and electric. The electric motor assists, and it also, when the vehicle idles, it idles on the electric motor generally.
Okay, but the gasoline usage is very similar between the two? Is that
Yes,
what I read there?
somewhere in the paperwork there, I think on the second or third page, I included
Yeah,
Ford has a calculation page that shows you what the calculations are for the savings in both fuel and in CO2 output. And that should have been included in the package that was sent.
Yeah, we have it.
I think it's around 32,000 pounds of CO2 over the life and around $1,700 worth of fuel.
Yep, and your 6.5-year payback period on a 6 to 10 year, average 8-year vehicle, probably.
Yeah, my vehicle right now is approaching 10 years of age. You may not want to have the next one last quite this long, but I think I'll make it till March 1st.
Yeah, I think eight is a significant, good long-term estimate that I would probably put in the capital program.
One thing I would add too is, I mean, Freeport is ostensibly an idle-free town, and I've had many townspeople come to me and ask, why are the police cruisers idling? And I know the answer for that is to keep the computers and everything running. But this is an opportunity to allow the future patrol vehicles and fire vehicles to maintain whatever electronics they need to, but also not necessarily be emitting CO2 at the same time. So it's another plus. So,
but doesn't this, I know in my truck that I just bought it's a 2018, you can turn the idle on and off. So when I stop, it goes off, but everything else stays on. So isn't that what the EcoBoost, does that truck have that same capability?
That I'm not sure.
Okay. I mean, I like the idea of the hybrid, but in lieu of what we have facing as, another $500,000 in cost for a bridge, for, $3,000 is what we're looking at saving. I know that's small potatoes, but any little bit helps.
That the difference between the two is based on EcoBoost versus hybrid. So,
Right. And that's the cost of purchase, right?
right. Correct.
Yeah, I think there is an argument to be made that the long-term, the gas engine is long-term lower maintenance on a, I think it's a wash either way, which is why we decided to present this as a choose your own adventure. Because I think the long-term maintenance will wash any savings, but the savings aren't as significant because this is not driven nearly the mileage as the one you're about to talk about, which is the police cruiser, which makes a lot more sense for it to be hybrid. So this is a completely non-consequential and political decision that is perfect for a town council.
Chicken.
Councilor Riley?
So going back to John's point that this is the direction we need to take, so we move all our fleets in the direction of environmentally conscious positions. And the future is with electric, and hopefully everything will turn to electric. So I support the hybrid purchase.
But again, this is electric and gas, not just electric.
Correct. But we're moving in that direction, Chip, little at a time.
Councilor Pilch?
I have 3 points. I think they're all kind of short. One is the hybrid electric and gas, the way I understand it. The electric engine kicks in, so the gas engine doesn't have to work as hard, so you get more miles per gallon. And so it's more than just the idle time. And then on the finances, we're looking at an upcharge of about $3,200 for an 8-year, give or take, vehicle. So we're talking about $400 a year or so of capital costs, which is pretty small. And the last point is that they're indicating a savings of $1,700 over the term of service of the vehicle, based on today's price of $2.75 a gallon, which is very low from the recent historical period. So I expect that price would go up over the next 8 or 10 years. I'm not predicting the future but it's a pretty likely prediction. So, and if that's the case, then the savings would go up as well. So the savings might come closer to approaching the upcharge. So it's even closer to a wash. So I would support the hybrid as well.
Other comments? Councilor Tracy?
I support the hybrid and glad to see the old chargers go and us to become more involved.
Councilor Whitney?
Yes, I just want to thank the chief for listening to us so many months ago now. My gosh, we were in the chambers, I feel, when this discussion first started. And I think it's very thoughtful that he has done so much research. Even before I was on the council, I always was impressed when I'd watched these meetings on TV. And one stands out in particular where Earl needed a new roof, and the amount of research that he did to find a contractor out of Bangor, Maine. I was just like, why wouldn't you grant it? My gosh, he's done such a great job researching. And I feel the chief has done the same, but I do want to ask before, my answer is if the chief has a preference.
I bet it's new.
I do not have a preference, although I have to agree that I kind of like the message it sends.
Great. Well, I support the hybrid also.
Okay. So we have to, do we have to modify our be it ordered here, Peter, in order to select one over the other?
Yep, so I would suggest making a motion to strike the, if it sounded like the preference was for hybrid, so strike the phrase EcoBoost and the $44,000 figure. And then we would have a clean order with with a hybrid and 47 and change.
Second.
So that was Councilor Riley moved and Councilor Horn seconded. I don't know if you caught that, Sharon.
I did.
I was talking over it.
So, okay, so that replaces Sarah's motion then.
It just
Yeah.
amends it.
Okay.
So we have to vote on the amendment, and then I think do we have to vote on the amendment and then we vote on the full thing?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. So the first vote then is to modify the language to specify the type of vehicle in the bid award to the hybrid vehicle with the correlated dollar amount. We'll go ahead and take that vote now. It's been moved and seconded. Councilor Riley,
Yes.
Councilor Tracy,
Yes.
Councilor Pilch,
Yes.
Councilor Horn,
Yes.
Councilor Lawrence,
Yep.
Councilor Whitney,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So this will be an easy vote then with unanimous consent on making the change to the language. Now we'll vote on the amended language, which provides the authority for the manager to go ahead and execute on the bid. Councilor Riley,
Yes.
Councilor Tracy,
Yes.
Councilor Pilch,
Yes.
Councilor Horn,
Yes.
Councilor Lawrence,
Yep.
Councilor Whitney,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Thanks very much, Chief.
Thank you, folks. Thank you.
When do you get it?
Right around March 1st, probably.
That seems like a long way away.
If we see,
They had a couple of problems with vehicles this year. The COVID early on shut down some plants, and then if you watched any of the a few police fire vehicles were put out of service this year due to activity that you might have seen on TV. So the number of replacement vehicles versus the number of vehicles available puts it out to about 150 days.
Wow.
good luck making it to the first with that old jalopy you're still driving.
Oh, I'm confident. The sticker runs out on February 28th, so I'm confident we'll make it there.
Chief Nurse, look the other way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chief. Our next item is item number 152-20. To consider action relative to awarding a bid for a new police chief vehicle. Councilor Horn, could you please read the bid order?
Sure. Be it ordered that the award for a new police vehicle be awarded to Casco Bay Ford for purchase of a hybrid SUV Interceptor and to Coastal Electronics for equipment and upfit for a total cost of $40,607.91. Note, the fiscal year 21 capital program appropriated $50,000 for this purchase. The police department equipment reserve balance is $338,500.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. We have information in the package about the same opportunity for the police chief's replacement vehicle to be a hybrid. Chief, do you want to have any further conversation? Probably going to be very similar to the one we just had with Chief Jordan.
Just want to point out it's a cruiser, not a chief's vehicle. It does say chief vehicle on the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But go ahead, Sue.
No.
Sorry to interrupt you.
That's all right. I was just going to say that it's not a replacement vehicle for me. It's a frontline vehicle, and the car that's being taken off the line is going to be traded in as part of the.
It's not going to be positioned down in South Freeport so people can stop at the stop sign and admire it.
If that's what you want, Doug, we'll make it happen.
Seems to be effective.
Chief, you also had Lieutenant Goodman here if there are any questions. I think he ran the bidding process, correct?
Yes, if there's other questions, Lieutenant Goodman is on the call to help out.
I think this was a straightforward analysis, a lot more straightforward with a higher mileage, lower lifespan vehicle, that it made a lot more sense to go with a hybrid vehicle as opposed to kind of the wash with the low mileage, long lifespan fire department vehicle.
And specifically, which vehicle is it replacing, Chief Nurse?
It's replacing a frontline cruiser, and that cruiser has been bid for a trade-in as part of the package.
Okay.
If you look at the matrix in the packet, it shows the breakout of what the different dealerships offered. That's why we're going with the high. Well, it actually ends up being a much better bid because you get $7,000, almost $8,000 trade-in versus the other offer was $2,800. So
right,
it's a nice bid process to get those two together, Chief.
Yeah, I was glad to see that it's a dealership that's close by too. It makes it easier for service and that kind of thing. So I'm glad they came out. It's great.
Any other conversation on this item before we go to a vote? Councilor Pilch?
Quick question. I just want to make sure I'm reading it right. If I look at the matrix of costs, is the Yankee Ford bid lower than the others?
Yes, it is.
However, they're not offering a $7,800 trade-in on the cruiser, and we estimate we'd get a lot less than that if we put it on the market.
I thought that was the final after calculating for the trade-in.
Yes. Okay. So down the bottom of where it says official bids, there are 4 dealerships listed, and Yankee Ford, the EcoBoost model, is the lowest of all the bids. But what I want to do is take the SUV hybrid, which is the second lowest.
Yeah.
And it also gives us a trade-in of $7,800. Do you see how that's laid out?
I do now. So Yankee Ford didn't offer an SUV hybrid bid.
Correct.
So the hybrids, the Casco Bay Ford is the lowest of the hybrid bids. Got it. Okay. Thank you.
And if we were going to go with a gas engine, I think we'd be recommending Yankee. But I think the difference is the $1,800 or the $1,900 difference is easy to make up in the life cycle of this car as opposed to the fire vehicle.
Yep, I agree.
Particularly since we're considerably under the capital budget allocation for this item too.
Yeah, we can put that towards the bridge.
Yeah, if it was only that easy. Any other comments or questions for Peter or the chief?
Lieutenant.
All right, we'll go ahead and take the vote on item number 152-20. Councilor Whitney?
Yes.
Councilor Lawrence,
Muted.
Yes.
Councilor Horn,
Yes.
Councilor Pilch,
Yes.
Councilor Tracy,
Yes.
Councilor Riley,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Motion carries unanimous. That's the last item of action and vote on our agenda this evening. We have 3 topics for the other business portion discussion. We've had previous discussion on 2 of the 3, but we'll start with the first one, which is probably the most pressing in terms of timing, which is regarding public safety in the era of COVID as it relates to the Halloween holiday coming up at the end of this month. Peter, do you want to start with the decision by the merchants downtown?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. I think, and the chief and the lieutenant can listen and weigh in if there's anything that they want to add, because this is kind of a public safety issue, I think, as well. And they were involved in the conversation with Visit Freeport. Basically, the merchants and Visit Freeport, I think, unanimously came to the decision that nobody was going to be doing the downtown trick or treat this year. At the stores, it's not physically possible for most of them due to occupancy guidelines, if you've seen the lines of people out in front of the stores and things like that. Never mind the fact that I still haven't seen a safe way to hand out individual packets of candy to people, keeping them clean and maintaining 6 feet of distance. Although the mask thing is maybe 50% covered with most of the kids' outfits and adults as well. So they've decided to put that off, as most people, actually some may not be aware, that's run completely by the downtown merchants and Visit Freeport every year. So the town does not organize that. And we support that decision. It seems very consistent with the CDC guidance that was released a couple weeks ago. That's in my opinion, and the PD's opinion, I think it seems like the smart thing to do. That brings us to the question of neighborhood trick-or-treats. As you're aware, some of the neighborhoods around town, specifically South Freeport, hosts neighborhood trick-or-treats in the village area there, and some other neighborhoods around town do door-to-door as well. And those are very unofficial. So we've gotten several questions about, is the town going to do this? Is the town going to do that? I'm not sure that it's really appropriate for us to get involved in that question. I would recommend probably that people follow the CDC guidance, which is not to do hand-to-hand trick-or-treat, and maybe to try to do other options on Halloween. However, I don't know if somebody decided to hold a neighborhood trick-or-treat, if that action, I don't think that it actually violates any of the standing coronavirus executive orders or anything like that are in place, because it's not a congregation of 50 or more people. It doesn't break any of the rules. So it leaves us in this kind of awkward position. They're not really our projects. They're not our events. They're not technically prohibited under the law, but they are recommended against. So my position is that we should probably discourage them, but I don't think there's anything that we could do to enforce it, even if the town decided that we didn't want to have any neighborhood trick-or-treating going on, because I don't think it really breaks any laws or rules. And I'm open to get feedback from you guys on this.
So I just want to be clear that the council is not being asked, nor is the council in a position to take any official recommendation on either one of these topics. The merchants' participation in this holiday event is completely outside of council direction and run by the merchants group with the participating businesses. And obviously the town council doesn't have any jurisdiction over what people do in their neighborhoods on various holidays. And as Peter just said, it would not violate any of the existing orders as issued by the state. So we don't really have anything to take an opinion on here in terms of an official position. But I think it is worth reminding folks about what the guidelines are. And so that's the conversation that we just wanted to put out here this evening. Councilor Riley.
I believe Councilor Horn would probably support me on this, but the South Freeport Village is not an organized event and is not hosting anything. So it's probably some way we need to make aware that we're suggesting that gatherings of a nature on Halloween not to be encouraged. And I think it's a fair position for the council to have, and that can go public through any one of our television stations or local publications, radio stations that share the community interest. And Eric, I don't know if you want any input on that or not.
No, I agree. I mean, I think we could give the town could give the caveat, look, we don't have any jurisdiction, but we are recommending or we're encouraging that that trick-or-treating not take place. Because South Freeport is probably most of us know, it has hundreds and hundreds of people down here. And so even if there are some diehards that want to do it, any kind of public announcement to sort of discourage it might knock some of the traffic down. I'm not expecting big crowds this year, but certainly wouldn't hurt to go on record, even if we can't enforce anything.
I only bought one bag of candy, and I hope that goes to council meetings.
I mean, I'm conflicted. I mean, I feel like it's not our jurisdiction. And so if we have any message, I think our message should be, to the extent that there's any activity, it needs to be compliant with CDC guidelines. And I don't really, personally, I don't feel like the town should go further and say you shall do or you shall not, you should not do. I mean, making people aware of what those guidelines are: masks 6 feet apart, outside, wash your hands, all of the precautions we've been saying. Beyond that, I don't know if I would support a town council message. That's just my opinion. I mean, I think complying with CDC guidelines is important, but
Well,
it's not our business beyond that. That's my feeling personally.
Yeah, who's going to get the phone calls? It'll go to town hall. They'll go to Peter. He doesn't have to talk bridges anymore. He can talk about candy.
Generally, we get phone calls about the downtown trick or treat. I can't remember, once or twice maybe in the entire time I've worked here, we've gotten inquiries about the village or any of the neighborhood groups that put on their own trick or treats. People don't generally acknowledge those aren't done by the town and don't ask us for information. We will let people know that the downtown event is canceled, obviously, because that decision's already been made. But
Councilor Pilch?
I think we can kind of have our cake and eat it too if we just refer to the CDC guidelines, which basically say, well, they do say verbatim, avoid these higher risk activities to help prevent the spread of the virus that causes COVID-19. The first of which is participating in traditional trick-or-treating, where treats are handed to children who go door to door. And they list other things that are medium risk and low risk. So if we point to that and say, look, the CDC is saying you should avoid doing this, and just leave it at that, I think that kind of allows us to say, hey, this is what we think is best in the interest of safety because the CDC thinks so. And here's a reason to find more information.
Good point.
Any other comments? I'm probably pretty close to being in the same position as Councilor Tracy, in that I feel like this is not something that the town has any official governance over, other than the general public safety and public health protection of our residents. So I think that's a reasonable position to take, Councilor Pilch, and would ask if the rest of the council agrees that that could be the formation of a position that we put out on our typical channels of communication, that we encourage people to follow the CDC recommendations when it comes to the holiday, which include avoiding, and then list the activities, and that we put that guidance specifically in our messaging.
a high risk, here I can put it up on the,
You're muted.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Peter.
so this is what Dan referenced. These are the CDC guidelines for Halloween. So low risk activities, or, traditional indoor family or spaced out outdoor events. And One-way trick-or-treating is a moderate risk activity. Small group, open air costume parade, things like that. Costume parties held outdoors where protective masks are used, et cetera, et cetera. High-risk activities are typically the things that we've been talking about. Participating in traditional trick-or-treating, trunk-or-treating, crowded costume parties indoors, indoor haunted houses, hay rides or tractor rides, using alcohol or drugs. I didn't know that was a traditional Halloween activity, but traveling to rural fall festival that is not in your community. So I guess I'd be going to a harvest fest in a different state or outside of New England for us, something like that. So I think those are, I think what Dan referenced, and those are the events. We can, we can put this guidance just on our website and all of our channels. I think that would probably be the right way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're gonna comment on specific activities, then I think we should refer to the CDC guidelines. I mean, I was listening to a hysterical discussion on the radio the other day where people are devising ways that they have like 6-foot plastic pipes, and they are taking tweezers or like tongs and putting the candy through the 6-foot plastic pipe so the kid can get it. I mean, I think if it's an extreme example, but I think people will figure out, some people may disregard it, but I think if people are creative enough to try and follow the guidelines, I don't know that we should be, I think we should just say, go see the guidelines.
Yeah. So that would be the moderate risk activities. One-way trick-or-treating where individually wrapped goodie bags. That's like one crazy idea about how you could do it and put goodie bags out somewhere. Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's been the tenor of the conversation leading up to this, is not what the town says should or should not happen, but what the town is recommending. And I think it's perfectly fine for us to recommend that the residents of the town follow the guidelines that's issued by the CDC and avoid high-risk activities. I think it can be that succinct.
And remember, if screaming will likely occur, greater distancing is advised. That's got to be my all-time favorite CDC guideline I've seen so far. The greater the distance, the lower the risk.
I believe that reference to alcohol and drugs goes back to the Hudson River Valley and the Headless Horseman.
No, possibly, yes. Hallucinogenics, yes.
Right. Okay. Does everybody feel comfortable with Peter crafting up that language to put out on our channels of communication?
Perfect.
Great.
Right. Thank you. That's perfect. That's exactly the type of guidance I think we were looking for. So.
All right. The next item on our other business was something that I added on because we have kicking around the opportunity for ways to approach recycling challenges our community has in several ways, with the overall goal being the dual arrows of increasing our recycling volume at Maine and reducing our municipal solid waste volume at Maine, which is where all of our trash ends up and all of our recycling ends up. As a reminder to anybody listening, we pay for municipal solid waste, and that includes paying the tipping fees of the commercial carriers who provide curbside service for trash pickup. One of them also includes recycling pickup. We also pay for the town. We collectively, all of us through our taxes, pay for contaminated loads of recycling, which then have to be transferred over to the municipal solid waste because of above acceptable thresholds of contamination. And we've had a couple of conversations in subsequent meetings earlier this fall, including the supposition that we were about to make a move, and we never even had a conversation about it, and had an enormous public response in the opposite direction for what was actually not even ever proposed officially. But we certainly got a good feedback on where the community thinks about this issue and what the community is interested in, and more specifically what they're not interested in. But we have a very effective sustainability advisory board committee, which has done a lot of research and has been promoting various aspects of activities and behaviors in the community that can address the goal that I started this with, which is to increase recycling volume and decrease municipal solid waste. And that includes matters of convenience and efficiency, and just what makes good common sense for how to accomplish both of those dynamics. But we specifically have not moved towards any conversation of a curbside recycling activity after just having it mentioned in an agenda item. But I wanted to sort of close the loop and be respectful and honest back to that committee, which has done an enormous amount of work, for the council here to provide some direction back to that committee about what it does, some direction from us about what we think should happen, could happen, and might happen in some particular areas of research that we might direct that committee to undertake in terms of recycling and trash. And I know we have a member in our audience this evening who is our Eco Maine representative, Rod Regier, who has been active in this conversation and provided data as well as a historical perspective, having been on the council previously when these issues have been discussed numerous years. I mean, we've been talking about this for quite a long time. So I don't want to turn this into a salon that goes on and on, but I wanted to provoke the idea again to get some specifics. If people have any specifics that we can document and send back to the Sustainability Committee for things to go investigate, so that we can keep the momentum going towards improving recycling volume and decreasing municipal solid waste volume. I'd like to invite Rod, if he's available and is still willing, to participate in the conversation. Peter, if we could move Rod over. Thank you, Rod, for attending. And as always, certainly value your perspective and certainly your knowledge as our rep to Eco Maine.
And I'm assuming that we've got Kate here from representing the Sustainability Committee, but I could be wrong on that. Kate Rosenfeld.
Oh, great. I didn't see Kate just a few minutes ago. That's good to see. Thank you. Yeah.
You want her as part of the conversation, right?
Absolutely, if she's willing to.
Well, I'm gonna take a, oh, do we have, is it? Yeah, that's a hand up. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna assume that means you want to be part of the conversation, Kate. So I'm gonna take a risk.
So again, there's not a specific request here. I'm just trying to elicit and some specific ideas as much as we can specify some suggestions for the Sustainability Committee to work on to bring more tangible action items back forward to the council to consider. So before we, I just want to give Rod a chance to comment, because he connected with me earlier today with a couple of comments and has a perspective that I think is worth hearing, and maybe give us a chance to kind of set the table. Rod, if you can unmute your microphone, that we'd love to hear from you.
Okay, is this working?
This is working.
Oh, okay. Hi, hello. Thank you for inviting me to participate. I've sent some information to you folks off and on through the months you've been discussing this, and I don't have anything large to add to that, but I do wonder, as we're talking about specific activities, we've certainly saved money overall by recycling rather than sending MSW to Eco Maine for the full tipping fee. The way you save the most amount of money is not send anything down to Eco Maine at all. And it occurred to me today that it's probably been 10 years at least since there was an active effort to make the black composting bins available to residents. There's a new generation of folks living in town, and this might be their conversation right now might be the catalyst to revisit that. It's a small level, but I know that even within a single person household, I probably put, I don't know, 300 to 400 pounds of waste in that composting bin each year, rather than sending it down to Eco Maine. And you don't need to do a lot of multiplying to realize how beneficial that could be. There certainly are a number of those old black barrels around town, but as I say, I wonder if this might be the moment to try to reinforce and encourage that action. The other thing that I think has been discussed along the way, and again, it's something bite-sized, which is manageable, is to consider the hours over the transfer station. I've always thought that was, I don't know that would be successful, but I think that would be a worthwhile experiment. Again, for any kind of recycling to be effective, it's got to be easy. And if there are more convenient hours that can be determined, then I think that would be very much beneficial. But other than that, I don't really have anything else to add to your conversation. But thank you for asking me to participate.
Question of Rod.
Thanks, Rod. Go ahead, Councilor Riley.
Rod, there has been no market with the single sort of recycling materials. What would happen if we entered into sorting out metals from paper? Is there a market there?
Right now, and again, I'm hoping that my audio works. At the last board meeting, EcoMaine, we went through the value that EcoMaine was receiving for the different recyclable materials. EcoMaine is still paying, not a lot, but it's still paying to make mixed paper disappear. Unfortunately, that's the largest weight going from the recycling center. There's a decent market for corrugated cardboard. There is a market for waste metals, but not very much. And there's a market for plastics, but again, it takes a lot of plastic to make a reasonable weight. And I think that again, you folks who've been around here for a while, you know that there was a discussion with regard to continuing exactly that activity at the transfer station, because at one time we did actually segregate all the material and sell it individually. And I think that there's, if you look at the cost benefit, the potential income from recyclable sales versus the additional cost for staff, I'm not sure that that's a winner anymore.
Thank you. The reason why I ask that is because if we were to promote having somebody pick up locally and take, instead of running all the recyclable materials into EcoMaine, but to bring them to the transfer station for sorting and then sale, would that be something that could not necessarily turn a profit, but actually increase the amount of recycling taking place, and yes, actually have some revenue come back from it?
Doug, that's really interesting. I can't give you a numeric answer for the detail. I do know that there are a couple towns in EcoMaine's membership that do exactly this. They segregate their own recyclables and then send them packaged separately down to EcoMaine. And there is a substantially different cost structure when that happens. I can't tell you what that is, though. You'd have to talk with the director down there, Kevin Roach. But that's something that, if in fact anything, it costs about $75 a ton for the recyclables to be processed in that single stream facility down there. So anything which is saleable, particularly corrugated cardboard, because corrugated still there's an active market for. If corrugated cardboard is segregated and sent to EcoMaine, again, I can't tell you the numbers, but it'd be a very different cost structure than anything we've talked about.
There was another piece to this too. Someplace in Maine, there was supposed to be a facility that was going to take on some of this material for use in producing items. Has that facility come online?
Not yet. The silver cloud that everybody's hoping for is the conversion of some of the former paper making mills to being able to use as their raw stock, not trees and wood fiber, but in fact a large part of recycled goods instead. There is the Black Dragon plant in Rumford is one. There's work under that right now. I don't know what the estimated completion time is for that, though.
Yeah, 9 Dragons. Yep. That's, I think, still a little ways off. Councilor Horn?
Thanks. A question for Rod. one of the things that jumped out at me, and I think it was material that maybe that you sent our way, was the percent of contamination that's coming from Pine State, the private hauler. It's way above anything that our silver bullets generate for contamination. And I know that we changed on the town side, we changed who pays the penalty, but I assume the town taxpayers pick up the tab for recycling that turns into waste in a contaminated load. Is that accurate?
If I understand, Eric, if I understand you correctly, I don't think so. I think that, again, with the action that you and the council took, probably a year and a half ago, it was exactly to isolate Freeport's liability from that problem.
But that was for just the penalty, or was it for the actual weight of the recyclables that are now trash?
I think it's the total cost.
The total cost. Okay, well, that's good news for the taxpayer.
The penalty is measured, Counselor, in weight.
In the
It's
weight,
per
yeah,
ton-
okay.
Per ton penalty.
Well, the contamination rates are very, very high, and I'm just wondering, did Eco Maine members like Freeport, do we have any leverage over the private haulers to encourage lower contamination rates beyond, basically making them pay for the waste themselves?
The only way I can imagine the town would be able to have leverage would be somehow incorporate that in your franchise fee to be able to, or the licensing fee to haul waste. I've asked different board members about their own experience with contaminated recycling, and Pine Tree, Casella, and Freeport is on the high side of average. And yet I ask board members, and I've never gotten an answer beyond greater education. And that's that one-dimensional answer I've always found kind of frustrating. I'm not sure how to handle that.
Yeah, I mean, that is frustrating. And I guess if we're trying to give some direction to the sustainability committee, I would love there to be, if we could figure out some mechanism, because we know education works, because you can see the numbers in our own silver bullets have come way down in contamination. But I wish, or I would like to see some way that the town could basically compel more compliance on the way recyclables are handled with private haulers that have very high contamination rates. In this case, it's just the two we talked about. So I think if we're looking for added work for the sustainability committee to be to research, I would love to. I'm all ears for hearing more options for how we can get that contamination rate down. Because even if they're paying for it, it's still, the ecological impact seems unnecessary to me.
Well, it'd be a contractual matter, I think, and then the real issue is how do you make the goal stick and not simply have it an added cost that gets passed on to the customers?
Yeah.
In that contamination rate with Pine Tree, does it hold up in other communities where they're doing the same thing with the quote unquote separation of recycled materials to waste materials? Or
I don't know. We've got a board meeting coming up later on this month. I'll actually pose that question.
I think it probably would hold probably the same percentages of 25% contamination, but it would be nice to know if the town of Freeport is doing better than other towns where Pine Tree is the only game in town.
Adam had his hand up. Adam, did you have an answer to one of the questions that Doug had asked?
So everything Rod has mentioned so far, I agree with. I agree that by weight, food waste contributes a lot to the tonnage delivered to Eco Maine. And if we can reduce that food waste by incentivizing composting, then we have opportunity to reduce our tipping fee cost. Now the question becomes, how do we incentivize composting? In the past, and we still do actually, offer compost bins at cost. Something we can explore is to take that to the next step, maybe by during the next budget season, look at offering so many composting units in the first, say, a 5-year plan, with the goal of that investment in offering free composting units to residents is offset by the reduced tonnage delivered to Eco Maine. Something we can explore moving forward. I do agree with Rod that if we were to go back to sorting recyclables, I don't think the cost benefit would be very good because of the added staff and the volatility of the recyclables market. I think the last thing I would say is any conversations we have, I request that operations and staff be part of those conversations. And meaning those conversations between the sustainability board, town staff, and council.
You just did bring up another point too, which said most of the weight that is involved in our trash is food waste. Would it be beneficial for us to invite company and other companies like Garbage to Garden to come and do a presentation before us, so that this is now becomes an opportunity for the citizenry of the town to actually hear what they have to offer?
Yes, education is a critical piece of this multi-pronged approach to the recycling and solid waste problem.
I would agree. I think I happen to know a little bit about that company, and I know they are extremely ambitious to get their message out about the ecological benefits of what they're able to accomplish through their business model. I think that I'm starting to see maybe a 6 to 12 month long program, and this may be some direction that I can help articulate in my next participation at the Sustainability Advisory Board, is to curate a series of events that we can try and have some sort of public exposure to. That's going to be hard to do in COVID, so there'd be electronic events, but starting with the opportunity to really learn more about composting. And I would agree that offering compost containers or vessels to residents may be one way to do it, but a lot of people, myself included, would just as soon have a small container and take it to a collection point and not have to be tangling with the chemistry that's going on in running my own compost activity at my property. So I think there's a couple of options to look at there, but that's the kind of conversation that way more people in our town hopefully could be and should be having around their own kitchen table about different ways that they can participate. Composting is one of them. Learning more about what is recyclable and not recyclable. And these are all perfect education opportunities. I get an email once or twice a week from Eco Maine, and they are just gushing with materials and resources and programs for both education groups and community groups and nonprofit groups to plug into, to learn more about just really understanding the waste stream. And so that in itself could be, another segment of this sort of season-long or year-long event series of education opportunities. So I'm starting to kind of get a picture of that, and I'd love to hear any more input from counselors, or certainly from our guests here this evening on some other topics or directions that we can then sort of itemize and put in a short list to send back to the committee.
Maybe I missed it, but I mean, are we asking the committee to look at pricing out curbside recycling only?
That could be certainly a research topic. I think that's separate from the education sort of community engagement dynamics. Getting the language around how the town would actually implement that is probably even more difficult than trying to figure out who and how it gets paid for. But that's certainly a possibility. Eric and I have talked about that a couple of times.
I think that's a possibility, or there's an opportunity there. And I have a lead on another community that has adopted such a program. That's the town of West Bath. They have a curbside recycling program. And I've actually reached out to their town manager, and I'm waiting receipt of their annual cost for such a program. The wrinkle to that example is they contract with not only that company to pick up the recycling, but they also contract with them to run their transfer station. And if I remember correctly, it's one of these private haulers we've been talking about with the high contamination fees.
Yeah, just a question. What's the size of West Bath, and where is the city or the village center?
What was the question, Councilor Riley?
What is the population of West Bath, and where is the village center?
I think West Bath is around 2,000 and change, maybe 2,200 or something.
It's less than 3,000, I think, or around 3,000.
Yeah.
I don't think there is a village center, is there? Don't they have Route 1 and it's kind of rural?
I wouldn't use that as a real good comparison for Freeport.
No, it's not great, but it's an example. We can it's a resource we can reach out to.
What do you know roughly what the cost is that we pay for the hauling of the silver bullet annually? I mean, because that is a real cost that this town bears, and I wonder whether, I assume a curbside recycling program would be more, but I wonder how much would be offset by eliminating the silver bullets. I mean, if people are getting their recycling picked up at the end of their street, they're not going to care that the silver bullet is not at the police station anymore, in theory.
Right.
Yeah, and if I recall, when we had 4 containers, I believe it was around $60,000 a year to haul those 4 containers to Portland. And curbside on the surface curbside recycling pickup on the surface makes sense, because yes, we have this challenge with long driveways down Freeport, but containers of recyclables are far lighter than containers full of solid waste. And
I just want to say, for the record, this is a hypothetical conversation.
Yeah.
And we're not moving towards any plan or proposal to institute curbside recycling.
This discussion is to discuss whether we even want to ask the sustainability committee to look into what it might cost. This is not a real move.
Thank you for saying that. The idea, it's a good idea. It also does not compete with our local hauler.
Right.
Isn't that $100 a haul for silver bullet?
Essentially, yeah.
Per haul.
Per haul of for 3/4 of a ton of material, uncompacted.
Right, which is about a 1/6 of the weight it holds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the compacted weight is 4 to 5 tons.
Well, if you put a couple of transmissions in there, you'll get it built up.
Yeah, I mean, for my part, I would support asking the Sustainability Advisory Board to at least flesh the idea out further. And I get it, it's not a formal proposal. And we've heard plenty about what we want, what we don't want as a community. But I think Rod hit the nail on the head. It needs to be convenient. And So that ought to be communicated to the sustainability board.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm in support of the education program, especially around composting. I think for those who haven't done it, to realize how relatively easy it is to do, whether it's on your own property or bringing it to the garbage to garden bins behind the police station, it's pretty easy and it makes a really big difference. I know for us, family of 4, we have one kitchen-sized bag of trash that we have every other week, mostly because of composting and recycling. So I think that's a good idea. I would also like to see some information about what it would take for us to do curbside recycling. In addition to making it more convenient, likely cheaper than it is today. We have the issues with compacting the silver bullets with all the trips that we make 2 or 3 trips a week to the silver bullet. And by compacting the waste, there's fewer trips down to Eco Maine. So there's a lot of benefits, I think, if we did curbside recycling, but I'm curious the cost. And kind of tying those two together, if we're doing curbside recycling, is there also an opportunity to do curbside compost, which I know some other towns and cities have done? If we've got the trucks and the staff anyway, or contracted out, doesn't matter to me. That could make composting even easier. So there's a little bucket at the end of your driveway and they pick it up. And that diversion of that waste, I think, will make a big difference in terms of weight that we send to Eco Maine.
Councilor Lawrence.
I would also like to see maybe do a trial run of keeping the recycling center and the transfer station open a little bit longer, because right now it closes at 4 o'clock, Wednesday to Saturday. Most people, I know most working from home now, but when you're working full time, you're not home till 4:35, so you can't get there. Then you have plans for the weekend. So, and a lot of the people that I talked to said, if the station was open earlier or longer, I would go there and it would make it more convenient. And now that we're all going to electric vehicles, we don't have to worry about the carbon going into.
And the money we saved on the police vehicle, we can apply towards part-time staffing.
Yeah, we're spending that 2 or 3 times over now.
Oh yeah.
But that's a good point, Chip. I think that's a piece of low-hanging fruit, to get a cost analysis in there and try out some episode of changing the hours there to see if it increases or decreases or doesn't have any impact at all on the volume.
And I think we need to let them know ahead of time. In other words, we can't say, hey, we're going to do this Monday and let it go for a week or 2, put signs out there saying, hey, we're going to be open this week, leave it a month out or something like that.
Right.
The next 2 months will be open at this time to see what it does. We're coming into winter, so I don't know if that's really going to be a big thing, but I know that it would be a lot easier if it was open. And I don't think it has to be open a whole lot longer, but if it was till 6 o'clock, enough for people to get home, or open, well, it opens at 7, right?
No, 9.
9. So maybe it could be on your run out of town too. I don't know. I don't think it's a lot longer time, but it's just, I think that would go a long way. And it's something we can do, I think, fairly easily.
Just 2 operational concerns. If we're going to do that, we're going to need to talk about staffing. Right now, there's 2 full-time people there, so we've got to have people there at all times, and that would essentially, we'd be adding staff. We also have to light the place. It's not lit, which is why you have those operating hours, because it gets dark slightly after 4 p.m. at certain times of the year.
Right. But during
anything beyond 4 p.m. It wouldn't be a huge cost, but there would be some capital upgrade costs there to light the place.
Make sure
you have to light the entire facility as well, because people drive behind it, on the scales, all that kind of stuff.
Make sure they're LEDs.
Yep.
And maybe we can figure out which days work better. It doesn't have to be every day. Maybe everyone, Wednesday, that's it. Yep. Everyone goes there Wednesday and then hits Gritty's for a beer on the way home, right?
And I'm not throwing those up as reasons not to do it. Yeah. I think we'd prefer to have a well illuminated facility, even if we weren't going to run it most nights. There are some days when you might need that, or certain times when you want to be there after dark. So, yeah. But just things we need to keep in mind. Can't just flip a switch on it.
Okay. So I've now written down 4 specific topic areas to bring to the committee for some research and investigation work, which I'm happy to share at the next sustainability committee meeting.
Councilor
as-
Whitney may have a 5th topic for you.
It's really little, and it doesn't cost anything, and it will help with all the tipping fees. Is there a way that we could get the gift shop back open so that it's, it's getting harder for people to be able to get rid of, skis that they don't need for the season, or, all the good things that end up at that gift shop, and wondering if there's a way to open those doors up again? Is there a reason why they're not open? I mean, I know when COVID first hit, I get that, but we do have other, other transfer stations have their swap shops open.
See if stage 4 opens up by the governor. If you just open up stage 4, it may be in there.
Right. Good.
Adam, do you have any input on that, or Peter?
I hear the request. I don't know. I didn't know that they were closed or what the length of the closing was. So it's not something that I notice usually when I'm up there every Saturday. So, Adam, do you have more info? Is that a safety precaution?
It was a COVID safety precaution, and something we just hadn't discussed about reopening. Same thing with the spring cleanup. We postponed that event, that weekly or 2-week event where you get a coupon for a free drop-off. We postponed that because of COVID. We said we would entertain having an event in the fall time, and here we are in the fall. A few residents have reached out asking if we're going to have that event, and so some direction on that would be appreciated. I have an opinion myself, but I will say we did do an honor system of drop-off when we were doing hands-free exchanges in the spring, and the honor system was give us your name and address and we'll send you an invoice, and we're still collecting over $10,000. We have yet to collect. We have $10,000 in outstanding invoices that just aren't being paid. And that's not public shaming. It's just do we want to have the event given we have, this $10,000 shortfall that we weren't really anticipating.
Like we've already used the spring cleanup money, but for something else than its intended purpose. In so many words, but yeah, I understand.
I know other communities have. I know other communities have postponed their events entirely. We did not go that far. We just postponed.
I mean, I at this point, I understand a few residents have reached out, but it doesn't sound like there's been a groundswell of objection about the spring cleanup. So I guess unless people feel differently, it seems like we could probably say that one was a wash and we try it again next year. I agree with Tani on the swap shop. I mean, we're having the same problem, frankly, with FCS. The drop-off times have been severely limited, and it is, even for somebody like me, I hate to throw stuff out, and I got stuff I've had in my car for weeks trying to find a drop-off time. So that eventually people just throw that stuff out. And so if we are trying to minimize waste, I think it doesn't seem like there's a reason to, or as much of a reason as there was this spring, to limit that accessibility to that resource. And frankly, in a time when people don't have very much money, it's nice to have that swap feature where, people are giving it to those who can make use of it. And this is a time of economic restraint, and it'd be nice to have that kind of support available, even though it's little.
Yeah, I agree. If there's a safe way to get the swap shop open, then I support it.
Okay. Well, thank you. I wanted to provoke some good conversation, which we just had for the past half hour. So I appreciate those inputs. I've got a number of recommendations here to bring back to the Sustainability Committee involving potential research on cost comparisons for curbside recycling pickup versus centralized community-based containers. The opportunity to review a change in hours and or days of operation at the transfer station as a trial period to see if it increases recycling, give it a fair shot, and to potentially come up with a proposal for a series of educational events over an extended period of time for the community to learn more about what actually goes into our solid waste stream and how they can help towards the goal of increasing recycling, decreasing municipal solid waste, and just overall reduction of volume. So those are, and the opportunity for learning more about composting. So those are the specific subjects that I'll bring back to the committee. Councilor Riley?
Could we ask Kate if she's liked what she's heard tonight?
Sure. Kate, you're under no obligation to participate in the conversation, but you're here, so we'd like to give you the chance to speak if you were so inclined.
Hi, councilors, and thank you. I raised my hand before just to let you know that I'm just here as an interested resident and I wasn't representing FSAB. I just am interested in the topic and just wanted to hear what was going on, and great discussion. And that's all I have to say. Sounds like a great list, and I will hand it back to y'all.
Thank you.
Sorry, Kate, I saw your raised hand as I want in. And
I'm not good with the whole Zoom protocol here. So thanks though for offering me the chance. Appreciate it. But
Yeah,
I'll sign off. Good night. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank Rod.
Thank you, Rod. Okay, so we have one other topic on our other business, which was to continue and hopefully conclude the conversation on our complete streets policy. At our last discussion on this particular item, we had not yet heard specified comments and feedback from staff as the policy came out of the ordinance committee. And we now have that. Those comments were included in the information on this particular matter in your council packets. So I don't know, Councilor Riley, you've been shepherding this issue along. Do you want to open with something in particular, or do we want to just ask the staff to summarize and chime in with their comments on the policy?
I'll be happy. And if I forget something, then I would ask to bring Doug Leland along, Peter, so that he can tag into anything that I may have forgotten. But this complete streets policy has been in works for a very long period of time. The request by council to get input from staff on this and other interested parties has come about, and that's in our packet. Again, the policy is a policy, and it's not anything which is part of an ordinance. And it's an internal document that actually sets the working guidelines for the Complete Streets Committee. And with the input that has come from town staff, as well as Chief Nurse has contributed back to this in her own way, there's plenty of opportunity for this document to go forward as it is, because what has been submitted by the others is the opportunity for the policy to keep changing as we go along. There is an annual review process, and an opportunity to shift direction written into the policy. So these considerations have been put in place. The committee not only is designed to make decisions involving complete street issues, but it's also willing to listen to criticism and make shifts and changes as necessary. So the action before us tonight is, do we wish to receive only, or do we wish to receive and approve this policy as it is written, understanding that these recommendations and the input by staff will be honored and implemented whenever they can be. And then I'd like to offer Doug a chance to tag on to that.
Doug, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks, John. I really don't have anything to add to that. You know, you've received comments from staff, and you've received comments from the committee regarding the staff comments, and you have the policy. If there are, you know, specific questions about different aspects of it, or any of the comments that I provided when I provided comments, be happy to elaborate. But nothing really more to add to what Doug had to say. I guess the only thing I would add is that, and it was a question that I asked this morning at Complete Streets, which was the significance between receiving and accepting. And I would tie this into the bridge discussion that you had earlier. It would seem that regardless of how the bridge discussion ends up, that multi-path, multi-use paths, bridges, pedestrian accommodation, cycling accommodation, and so on, that's going to be part of future discussions in town for some time. And we know from whether it was discussions around the TIF or discussions around the bridge, that none of it is inexpensive, and that if the town wants to go in that direction, it's going to cost some money. And currently, the feds have made you know, $500 million available for just those types of projects. They haven't distributed any of that yet, but there are a lot of other sources of funding too. So my question this morning was that the distinction between receiving and approving, or receiving and accepting, does that change the perspective of those who are in a position to grant money? Do those words signal to the people who grant money a level of commitment from the towns that they will potentially be giving money to? And if there's a significant difference in those two things, I would factor that into your thinking regarding this policy.
That's a good point, for sure. Caroline or Adam, do you have any comment or response to Doug's clarification question there about the particular style or notion of our action on this as it relates to potential grant opportunities?
I would like to comment. I think it's a great comment. Today at the MDOT meeting, the bridge program manager asked us for supporting examples of how the town, or how and when the town plans to connect into these bridges. We've already provided a persuasive argument on Desert Road because of the development and the existing infrastructure. And so because our argument for Mallet Drive will benefit from having a complete streets policy in place. And that will supplement everything that Active Living and Complete Streets has put together over time, these workshops that have happened, and so forth. So we benefit. We benefit monetarily. Sorry, Caroline. We benefit monetarily because that cost share has the potential to greatly increase. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Oh, I just wanted to add, I think, having a policy in place could be beneficial. We do have some potential development on the horizon, some I think, which has a potential to have a public component or impact areas in the public right of way. And definitely having this in place beforehand would support any requests that are made of any developers. But also, you don't want to rush. You want to make sure you have a clear policy on the books, which is why some of the comments were raised. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer questions if you had any on the comments that were made by staff.
I also liked something I read. It was a comment or a response to a comment that having such a policy will help drive revision of our comprehensive plan and relevant ordinances. We know the comprehensive plan will have to be updated here over the next few years, 2-3 years anyway.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Other counselors have comments on the specific question of receiving versus accepting, or the actual activity that we're going to take here as a group? Peter?
Yeah, just wanted to touch on the question of whether or not this relates to what action you're going to take on it, whether or not this will be referred. This is, as we cleared up through some of the comments, staff comments and the responses, it's not clearly delineated in the policy, but it's clearly intended that it applies to public development, meaning projects that are, town projects that are approved and funded by you folks. But the question of whether we want to apply these standards to private development as well. So I know I talked with a couple of counselors about the possibility of referring it to planning for, implementation into our private development standards. Right now, you can't require something of a private road developer unless you go through the legislative process and make requirements that they have to follow. Adopting a policy doesn't meet those guidelines. So you can't, pass a document. You can't adopt a document and it means that somebody has to build $400,000 worth of infrastructure on their private development project. You have to go through an ordinance adoption process to make that happen. And that's tightly governed by statute that has to go to the planning board, then come back to the council, et cetera, et cetera. So the question is this something that we want to entertain referring to our planning boards so that they have I know Caroline was moderately in favor of this. It would create a lot more work, but to standardize kind of the development between private and public projects in town so that you're using kind of one set of guidelines.
Yeah, I think I certainly feel like there would have to be a whole lot more discussion about the actual impacts in terms of cost before I could feel comfortable that these policy recommendations become part of a land use ordinance in terms of directly affecting private development. I think that's actually quite a substantial difference in overall policy direction that as a council we might take. Implementing a set of design standards and criteria and value statements about public infrastructure, I believe is significantly different than using that and putting it over the entire land use ordinance where it affects all private development as well. We have a pretty robust land use ordinance right now. Many would say complex and thick if you're looking to do projects. However, it also yields really quality, well situated and well incorporated projects at the other end. So there's a purpose for that process, but I think that that's a significant leap that I don't think we'd be in a position to take on right now with the level of review and the level of specificity that's in the current Complete Streets policy. I think that's just a significant difference of effect. Councilor Lawrence?
Yeah, well, is there any benefit to at least putting definitions together so that when you're talking on complete streets or you're talking private development, at least we're talking the same words mean the same things. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think the scope of where those parameters and where those design elements and recommendations and performance standards that are referenced in the complete streets policy as a goal for the overall town to be aiming towards, yeah, you can spend an entire 3-hour planning board meeting talking about one sentence in an ordinance language element about width, dimensions, and setbacks related to sidewalks, for instance. So the specificity there absolutely makes a difference, and I'm pretty close to the end of my plank in terms of really understanding the dynamic of how planners use land use ordinance language in order to craft the process in a balanced way to be accommodating and allowing for development projects to move forward while also recognizing values and design standards that the town has in place. It's a very difficult, very detailed pathway that in our case, Caroline engages in on a weekly, daily basis. So, but I would agree that the vocabulary needs to be consistent if it's going to be applied. My point earlier was just that,
yeah,
I think it's a dramatic difference in impact in terms of scope about whether the effects of the complete streets policy are now directly connected to changes, upgrades, improvements, and revisions to the overall land use ordinance, because that is an enormous lift, which would require substantial planning to implement. Councilor Pilch?
Couple of questions. One is along the public-private line, is there a mechanism for us to include recommendations and suggestions rather than requirements? So in other words, giving private developers bonus points for saying, if you do this, we would look favorably upon it, but today we're not going to require it.
Yeah, I don't know. Caroline, do you have a response to that?
I feel like that's really tough. We have a lot of standards right now that are just too gray and too unclear, and too many people are interpreting them in different ways. So we can always ask a developer for things, and a lot of times they say yes. But I'd hate to be pushing them towards doing something without some really clear standards in place. I don't think it's fair to the developer and fair to the boards or whoever's reviewing the projects.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. To Tip's point, I think it might be good to offer some language and frameworks for how the town is approaching it, so that if the developer is seeing market pressure to do these kinds of things, at least they can do it in a way that's consistent with how we're doing it as a town. So in other words, that motivation isn't coming from us, but coming from the market saying, hey, if I'm going to do a big residential development, I'm pretty sure the people who want to buy those homes would want bike paths. Well, okay, great. This is the way the town is doing bike paths and how you can connect into it. On the policy side of it, the question I have is around the policy versus ordinance question that was raised. And if we accept this as a policy, which I think is how it's written, it gives us some guidance and gives us some suggestions as to how we might think about things when it comes to capital planning. But as I understand it, it doesn't bind us to spend the money to have to do the kinds of things that might inflate the cost of a project. So for instance, the Route 22 bridge or the Exit 22 bridge, if this was an ordinance, would we have to do that multimodal path? Would this ordinance require us to do that? Or is it just a policy that would suggest that we should do it if we could?
There's not really a distinction when you're talking about the town, because if you're breaking your own ordinances, you're responsible. You as the council or the ultimate body, you know, through the enforcement mechanisms and all that, responsible for enforcing your own ordinances ultimately. So if you choose to break them, there's nothing anybody can do about it, or ignore them, for example. But if it makes a vast difference if you're talking about private, regulation, because a policy is a polite way to ask something essentially, or the way we're going to do business. It's non-binding. It's not legally binding. So if it has to do with regulating anything, a policy does nothing. An ordinance is required essentially. In terms of where you're telling the town to do something, a policy is a slightly more polite of a request than an ordinance, but there's no way that somebody could use an ordinance to, force you to do something, because you're the body that's ultimately responsible. The town is ultimately responsible for enforcing its own ordinances. So.
Yeah, but the policy is the first step towards our process boards like the planning board to go ahead and start implementing these things into potential language that ends up in ordinance. I think we had, to illustrate your point, I'm remembering rather clearly, we started off the idea of our public information sign at the public safety building, and talking about what we wanted it to do and how we wanted it to function, and very quickly found out that the sign, which was going to be on town-owned property, was going to be in violation of the sign ordinance that controlled that zone that the town property was sitting in, which didn't look so good, that we were going to move forward with a capital project overtly and intentionally violating our own sign ordinance. So we took the steps to modify the sign ordinance to allow for the activity that we happily finished earlier this year. So I guess I wouldn't dismiss it as it's just a friendly way of saying. I think a policy carries a little bit more weight than that, and it indicates, again, as Doug has mentioned a number of times, a set of values and an overall value statement about how the town wants its public infrastructure to function. And I think it's an evolving document, and I think eventually, further or subsequent councils and planning boards can pick it up and take it even further. So I'm interested in just getting a feel for our group this evening, to go ahead and accept it and adopt it as a policy, knowing that it actually doesn't pull any levers just yet, but that that gets onto a path to eventually start having some impact as it floats through our planning process and our planning board. Councilor Riley?
Eric first, please.
Eric?
Thank you. Yeah, so I had to unmute myself. Yeah, I'm on board for accepting, in the spirit of it being a framework that is evolving. I liked that it has an annual review provision that Councilor Riley pointed out. This is it's kind of like a compass for our town, and it really kind of directs where we want to go. And it has some aspects of being aspirational, because we've got a long way to go in some places and not in others. But I think this is the kind of document that I think this town has been lacking for a long time. I would support accepting it, knowing full well that it is something that will evolve over time. And I understand in terms of the section around jurisdiction, when it talks about the private development projects, I think Councilor Egan is right. We do have a robust land use framework now. So I would just want to make sure that, in the spirit of it being an evolving document, that we lead on the public spaces that the town is responsible for first. But I think it's a great start, and I'd like to see it move forward. And I thank Councilor Riley and Doug Leland for shepherding this.
Councilor Riley?
So again, just to reiterate the point, Councilor Egan, when you said this is a first step. It really is a first step. And it's a first step that then ties in eventually to the planning as we go forward. And eventually this policy is the basis for what we'll look at when we begin to work with the public and private sectors in any development within the town. So this, again, first step. And when it's time, I would like to propose a motion.
Any other comments?
Before we get into a motion, I want to understand the status of the staff comments. I know that there were responses to the staff comments, but it's my understanding that the policy hasn't yet changed to reflect some of the staff comments that even Doug Leland agreed to. Is that right?
That's correct. They're in consideration, and again, this is a flexible enough document that it is nothing more than policy. So it can be changed at any time, but there is that annual review that's there. And maybe Doug Leland would like to add a comment to that as well.
I don't have the documents in front of me right now, but my recollection is that a number of those areas where there was agreement on where changes could be made, that most of those were not significant and they could be changed very quickly. I don't think it would have to wait for, at least this first time around, for the staff comments. I don't think that needs to wait for an annual review.
That was my interpretation as well, Doug.
Yeah.
That the staff comments could be incorporated pretty easily here without any controversy.
Yeah, the only thing I would, I personally would have to look at if it was of benefit is go back and look at staff comments and see where there was a agreement on the staff comments or where something was still needed further discussion. And I just don't have an answer for that right now.
It seems to me, I don't have any objection to, I don't have a strong feeling about the form in which we, take on this policy. I think a lot of work has been done, and I think we need to recognize it in a way that both gives it the credit it's due and also puts us in a good fiscal situation for having something that is evidence of our commitment so that we can leverage other monies that will be consistent with this policy. So that I'm okay with that. What I do have reservations about is accepting a policy that where we have staff comments and they haven't, and there's agreement as to the changes that might need to be made, and it hasn't been made yet, because it's sort of like we're on notice that the policy is not quite there yet. And sorry to draw this out. I know it's been like the longest thing ever, maybe save the plastic bag discussion or the Shellfish Commission discussion, which Doug was also involved in. But I don't, I guess I don't understand why we wouldn't just incorporate those comments and then adopt a fully formed policy, as opposed to incorporate something where we know already the staff has spent time commenting on, and there's agreement on some of the comments and it hasn't been incorporated yet.
I can only speak about my comments. My comments were really a synthesis of things that were brought up over the course of developing this policy at the committee or within the committee, and most of my comments were just requests for clarification, and they have been my questions have been answered regarding, is this a policy or an ordinance, and what is the how are decisions made in terms of if there's disagreement between a committee recommendation and staff. So I think if it helps, I am all set.
Okay, Caroline, or how about you?
Yeah, so I did come into this later, you know, Adam was involved in it all the way along. I found that it lacked clarity in places, which were the reason for most of my comments. None of them were, you know, major. It was really just kind of cleaning up to be clear that this does not involve private projects. Therefore, it wouldn't involve the project review board at this point. And it's really just going to apply to municipal projects in the right of way. And then there was a few other, you know, just suggested edits that Doug was in agreement with. But it looks like Peter wants to comment.
I'm just raising that one question again, that I'm a little bit confused at the resolution, because I had talked about at the very beginning about whether this would be implemented through you know, project review board, planning board adopting standards, which doesn't seem like there's a lot of appetite on the council, but that's exactly what Caroline raised, the same exact question, and Doug's suggestion was exactly that the project review board would go through and adopt these standards is exactly what I think there was pushback from the council that isn't what's wanted at this time. So I guess there's like three different, I feel like the jurisdiction paragraph number 7 is completely unclear what direct, doesn't seem like anyone agrees with what's written in the actual policy, and there's 3 different ways that we want it to go. But the council wants, or the majority of the council at least, didn't support one thing. I suggested one thing, not that wasn't my idea, but just a suggestion of a way it could go. And then Doug is also suggesting kind of a different way that it could go, similar to what I had originally said, but a little bit different in his response to Caroline's comments. So, and that just has to do with whether it applies to private or public projects. So number 7, if you look at Doug and Caroline's email exchange, page 4 of 6, it's bullet point 4 on Caroline's. It's just completely unclear to me. In the policy, it says private developments requiring review by town's project review board shall comply with relevant portions of the town's complete street policy and specifically address compliance measures within the application and permitting process. And there's no way that we can legally do that through a policy. That can't have any weight. Just an order of the council can't make that have any weight. Have to be adopted as an ordinance.
I think you can just take, if you want, just take the whole paragraph out. The intent there, my understanding when we were pulling this together is that there was a desire to have more integration of complete street initiatives in both public and private projects. But there's nothing that exists in the planning and comprehensive plan that would drive that down to a complete streets policy.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
The jurisdiction piece was there to say the complete streets policy is ready to accept those, and we have a placeholder here for it. That if the planning board comes down and says this is an expectation we have, then the complete streets policy is saying great, then that's an expectation. But if you take it out, you can just wait until planning or comprehensive plan comes through and says, you know, complete streets, you need to add something into your policy.
I think you're saying the same thing, Doug. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. My comments earlier about the difference between a policy directing town decisions about town projects and public property and private and public right-of-ways is significantly different than having it articulated in a land use ordinance, which affects all private development. I think there's considerable distance between those two adoptions, but they're not disconnected. There's some distance, and I think it'll take time and some public hearings on the part of the planning board to consider the exact language that Caroline is looking for specificity on as it relates to being written into an ordinance. But I think, again, the policy, we don't ever have any of that if we don't have a policy out there that says, here's what the town considers as a value statement. So that's why I see them as sort of a sequential process, and it's not, I don't think that if we're specifically deleting the reflection of the policy affecting private projects and private property now, that we're forever eliminating the ability for this policy to influence those private projects on private property. I just think that until we have such language, as Peter's just pointed out, in our ordinance, it doesn't provide anything right now. But I think that it's a lantern on the pathway here for us to get there. And that's what I'm interested in us trying to move forward.
My only concern was with the word shall.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
I agree with everything everybody's saying on that, though. So
my higher level comment is, it seems like there's some cleanup that needs to be done, and I'm not sure that we should be adopting a policy that, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can all tell me I'm wrong, but it seems like there's some final work that needs to be done to reconcile something.
Councilor Lawrence.
The question on that first, though, is when you say adopting, are you talking an action by the council in adopting, and this will then regulate us, because this is only an internal document within the Complete Streets Committee.
The question I had, and I agree with Sarah, is this the document we're going to, or is this going to be edited after today? Is this going to be edited after we adopt this policy? And if it's going to be edited, let's get it edited and then vote on it. Is what I'm saying. I think that's what Sarah's saying.
Yep, and I think that's becoming apparent here that there's a little bit too much ambiguity about what parts of the comments and responses to the comments are negligible, and of course, yes, and we heard the engineer say he's all set, but we still don't have that final text in front of us. So, Councilor Riley, in your positioning of a motion, maybe you could incorporate that sensitivity of where the council is.
Then I would propose a motion to table this discussion until our October 20th meeting, and that the revisions suggested by the town manager in Article 7 be considered for revising, and that again a check with the town engineer and the town planner to finalize any other changes take place before this goes forward. And this action can be done with the Complete Streets Committee Chair and Vice Chair.
Second.
Discussion, question, brief question.
Yes, Peter.
So the agreed changes, I think there's a chunk of them that nobody's questioning, that there's no debate on. We should just work to incorporate those with Doug and with the vice chair. That's who I think.
Right around.
Yep.
Greg is the chair and Doug is the vice chair.
Okay, and anything that's not agreed to, if there's a serious question or anything like that, we'll flag for, like 1 or 2 or whatever is left for in the final document that's presented to the council on the 20th for you guys to make a decision on. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Consistent with what you want, Doug? Okay, good.
That sounds like a reasonable plan, I guess, and if we can articulate exactly what those unresolved items are so that we can dispatch them quickly and move this forward. Great. Okay, so we've got a motion and it's seconded. All in favor? No, I'm sorry, can't say that. Councilor Riley?
Yes.
Councilor Tracy?
Yes.
Councilor Lawrence?
You can say it, we just can't act on it, but yes.
Councilor Pilch?
Yes.
Councilor Horn?
Yes.
Councilor Whitney?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Great conversation. Thank you all. Councilor Riley?
Before we sign off for tonight, I again would like us as a council to recognize the good work of Doug Leland over the years in transforming traffic and parking into complete streets and into the vision of the future of Freeport. It's great work. Greatly appreciate everything he's done.
Agreed.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Agreed. Thanks
Thank you,
very much,
folks.
Doug.
Just a quick question on process going forward now in terms of making these, considering these edits and determining what the final copy looks like. Is that a Complete Streets driven process now? Is it Peter Joseph driven process? Is it staff? Who's driving that piece?
I believe the manager will confirm the position of the staff in terms of the comments and then review what is the draft final policy language with you and the chair of the Complete Streets Committee to get your concurrence that the edits that are being proposed are not deviating from your intent of the original policy proposal coming forward.
Okay, very good.
Yep, but Doug, Caroline and I will work with you over the next week or so to get a draft up and for us to look at it. If there's anything that's outstanding, we'll just flag that for council action. So there might be 1 or 2 items that they've got to talk about next time, but not like 6.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Doug. Councilor Riley?
If there is nothing else to say tonight, then I move to adjourn.
Second.
I believe that is the end of our printed agenda. Moved and seconded. Councilor Riley?
Yes.
Councilor Tracy?
Yes.
Councilor Lawrence?
Yes.
Councilor Pilch?
Yes.
Councilor Horn?
Yes.
Councilor Whitney?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Our meeting is adjourned at 9:30. Thank you all for a very cogent conversation on some really juicy stuff. Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, Sharon.
Hello, Mr. Joseph. How are you?
Doing good.